Heading back to Shuangwu County, the team and I decided to take a different route. The old route from Shuangwu County straight to Yangfeng's military base was short, but it had too many treacherous mountain roads, making the risk of flash floods and landslides extremely high. If even a single section of the road was washed away by floodwaters and turned into a ravine, even the mobile base vehicle would have a hard time crossing it. So this time, the Shiying team chose a longer route, taking the secondary highway connecting to Suhuang, completely avoiding the mountainous terrain. Without having to deal with steep mountain passes, the base vehicle's speed was practically flying. The minibus rolled along the highway, passing through villages that had been swallowed by the floodwaters. Thanks to the super bulletproof tires, any rocks blocking the road were crushed by the vehicle, and the base vehicle easily waded through deep water sections. Stray zombies were rammed straight into bloody pulps, posing absolutely no threat to us. Sun Xuanxin sat in the base vehicle, watching the villages and forests outside flash by like the wind, and could only sigh in amazement. Even before the apocalypse, he had never ridden in a minibus that was so smooth, fast, and luxurious. The base vehicle approached a place called Fonting Village. It was a gentle slope, and the Suhuang secondary highway appeared in the distance. In the sky, a few solitary stars began to appear. The rain had stopped. This was the final stretch of darkness before dawn, and also the time when people were most easily fatigued. Inside the vehicle, the members of the Shiying team were all fast asleep. Only Ying was still driving the base vehicle, maintaining a steady speed and pressing forward. In a half-awake state, Ren Xiu suddenly opened her eyes. As a mental-type mutant, she was more sensitive to the mental fluctuations around her than ordinary people. Because of this, her sleep was always in a light, hazy state, but in exchange, she had a much stronger ability to sense danger. As soon as she opened her eyes, she saw my bright, piercing gaze. Actually, I had woken up even earlier than her. Having undergone brain nerve enhancement and bloodline awakening, my body no longer needed as much sleep as a normal person. Less than 3 hours of rest was enough for me to fully recover. Oh, a string of bizarre sounds echoed from afar, rapidly approaching the Suhuang secondary highway. I immediately went up to the combat room on the roof, gripping my Type 81 rifle. Not long after, eerie green eyes appeared in my line of sight. At the edge of my vision, amidst the flooded fields, dark silhouettes began to surface from the water one after another. It was a pack of wild dogs swimming through the floodwaters. Their forelegs paddled furiously, splashing waves everywhere. Every single one of them was skin and bones, yet they exuded a terrifyingly vicious aura. The alpha leading the pack was as big as a pony, its long fangs fully exposed, drool dripping into the water. Its forelegs were as sturdy as a warhorse's, and it let out a menacing growl as it swam. Warning: energy fluctuations of mutated beasts detected. The Starbug's voice echoed in my mind. At this moment, only Sun Xuanxin was still fast asleep in the vehicle. The rest of the Shiying team were all awake. The continuous battles had given everyone an almost instinctual reflex to danger. Zhang Hai sprang up, casually grabbing his giant wrench, once a familiar car repair tool, now his personal weapon. Sun Kuan also opened his eyes, pulling his Type 54 pistol straight out of his pocket. Everyone quickly entered a combat-ready state. My finger rested on the trigger of the Type 81, my eyes locked onto the leading mutated dog. But just as the pack of mutated wild dogs charged over, less than 10 meters away from the minibus, the alpha suddenly let out a low, muffled growl, then led the entire pack to change direction, scrambling up the dirt path by the road and fleeing in the opposite direction. This pack of dogs is terrified. It's like they're running away from something, Ren Xiu remarked in a low voice. With her sharp mental perception, she clearly felt the chaos and fear in the alpha dog's consciousness. Almost as if to prove her words, the dogs trailing behind, still swimming in the water, suddenly let out panicked yelps. In the pitch-black water, a massive wave suddenly surged up, dragging a huge body with it. Something as black as an ancient tree trunk shot out of the water, tightly wrapping around several wild dogs and dragging them straight down to the bottom. What the hell is that? Zhang Hai pressed against the window, a chill running down his spine at the sight. Faced with the unknown, human fear is always magnified. The less clearly you can see what's lurking in the murky water, the greater the psychological pressure. It's a mutated water monster, I said in a deep voice. Even though that monster struck incredibly fast, it still couldn't escape my eyes. In the split second it revealed itself, I managed to catch a glimpse of its massive head. A mutated water monster. Everyone was stunned. In the current flooded conditions, if such powerful mutated monsters existed underwater, the danger level would multiply exponentially. Compared to zombies and mutated beasts on land, which we could still deal with, these creatures lurking beneath the murky, filthy water were truly terrifying, because no one knew where they would pop out from. My heart felt heavy. The underwater monsters had finally shown themselves. I was certain that the water level would continue to rise. The Fuyang River was connected to the Huangjiang River, and it was located downstream. The entire Subei region was split in two by the Huangjiang River, and with this horrific amount of rainfall, the Huangjiang's water level would definitely surge even higher. In the current situation, the breached levee of the Fuyang River was practically a natural spillway for the Huangjiang. Watching the relentlessly rising floodwaters, I couldn't help but imagine an even worse scenario. When the water submerged everything, more and more aquatic monsters would appear. I didn't dare think any further. The base vehicle didn't slow down at all. I had him drive straight onto the Su Huang secondary highway. Although this highway had been severely ravaged by zombies and time, with cracked roads and many abandoned vehicles blocking the way. Compared to the mountainous roads from before, this was still the flattest stretch of road I had encountered in months. The base vehicle sped along the highway. Light gradually filled the sky, and morning finally broke. Through the windows, the Shering team could clearly see the scenery on both sides of the road. All of Subei was submerged in floodwaters. The once bustling city was now just a vast expanse of water. Tall buildings jutted out of the water like isolated islands. Roads, streets, and residential areas had completely vanished, leaving only a wide expanse of muddy yellow water swallowing everything. On the Su Huang Highway, quite a few small, scattered groups of survivors were desperately fighting against hordes of zombies. They used to hide in scattered shelters throughout Subei to avoid the undead, but the flood forced them out, pushing them into another bloody hell. Our base vehicle barreled straight through, ignoring the cries for help echoing behind us. None of them could catch up, because how could human legs ever match the speed of a six-wheeled base vehicle? The survivors left behind gradually turned from begging to anger. Curses echoed in the wind, mixed with desperate weeping, reaching the ears of everyone in the vehicle. But no one said a word. In the post-apocalyptic world, mercy was something that had to be used with extreme caution. The old water conservancy expert, Sun Shuangxin, sat quietly looking out the window, his eyes full of inner turmoil. He pitied those left behind, but he also knew that the Shering team saving him was already a massive favor. He had no right to demand anything more. The rest of the team was already used to this sight. Facing zombies time and time again had hardened them. They no longer easily trusted or extended a helping hand to outsiders. Resources in the vehicle were limited, and more importantly, no one could be sure if those people were friends or foes. In the early days of the apocalypse, too many had paid with their lives for their kindness. I stared straight ahead, thinking coldly to myself that we couldn't save everyone. The roar of the engine grew louder. The base vehicle continued to accelerate on the highway, leaving the curses and faint cries far behind. Suddenly, the roar of different engines echoed from the distance. A few minutes later, a convoy appeared on the road ahead. There were 8 vehicles in total, led by a modified Hummer H6, its armored body stained with dried blood and zombie guts. Mounted on the roof was a massive bull skull with 4 sharp horns, looking incredibly ferocious. Behind it were 4 off-road vehicles and 3 large buses, each packed with people. On the roofs of the buses stood tall, shirtless men holding makeshift guns, machetes, and all sorts of crude weapons, glaring at us warily. Zhang Hai cursed at the sight. Motherfucker, these guys actually dare to block the road. Xiang Shuahai quickly assessed the situation, frowning as she said it was the Savage Team, a veteran survivor group operating in the Subei area. She could call them to make way. The Savage Team was a notorious mobile raiding group. Their leader, Ing Hausen, was a martial arts instructor before the apocalypse and possessed terrifying mutant powers. After the world collapsed, he raided police stations, armed his entire crew, and became a threat that made many other factions wary. Even Yang Feng hadn't dared to clash with them head-on in the past. But before Xiang Shuahai could make contact, I cut her off. My voice was deep but decisive. No need to negotiate. We don't have time. Just ram straight through. Xiang Shuahai froze for a moment, a flash of worry in her eyes, but ultimately said nothing more. She knew very well that this coldness and decisiveness were exactly why I had survived until now. I immediately ordered Ying to accelerate. The base vehicle's engine roared furiously. Fuel was drained like crazy, converting into massive kinetic energy. The already fast vehicle sped up even more. The wind howled piercingly, and the tires screeched against the asphalt like a death warning sent to the convoy ahead. On the other side, the Savage team quickly realized the danger. Shouts and curses erupted. They panicked when they saw the base vehicle charging at them without slowing down. Some screamed that we were crazy. Others yelled orders to shoot the tires. Right at that moment, a massive V-shaped metal ram suddenly deployed from the front of the base vehicle. The cold glint of metal made the faces of the crowd pale. They tried to brake, but it was too late. The base vehicle accelerated like a giant beast, barreling straight toward the blockade without a shred of hesitation. A few guys in the Savage team fired wildly, trying to blow out our tires. But the bullets only sparked harmlessly against the armored body, and our base vehicle didn't slow down one bit. Clang, clang. The sound of metal colliding rang out rapidly. The arrows and scattered gunfire from the Savage team were nothing more than a tickle. They didn't even leave a scratch on the base vehicle's hull. At this point, the vehicle was at its maximum acceleration, all attack systems deployed, bearing its vicious fangs. The speed spiked to 180 kilometers per hour, far surpassing even pre-apocalyptic F1 race cars. It was like a giant dinosaur roaring as it smashed straight into the convoy ahead. Boom. The off-road vehicle and bus blocking the way were sent flying. The off-road vehicle was flipped into the air. The people inside tumbled out, crashing onto the road with agonizing screams. The bus was sent rolling several times, its rear torn wide open. Scrap metal, seats, and airbags scattered everywhere. After the collision, the base vehicle didn't slow down, charging straight at the modified Hummer H6. The driver of the Hummer H6 was a red-haired young man with the sides of his head shaved bald, leaving only a row of spiked hair like a rooster's comb. Before the apocalypse, he was a professional off-road racer. Now he was the Savage team's ace driver, with incredibly seasoned skills. At first, he didn't care at all. In his eyes, what could a mere minibus possibly do? But when he glanced in the rearview mirror and saw the base vehicle deploy its V-shaped ram, speeding up like a missile and directly sending the vehicles ahead flying, he instantly broke out in a cold sweat, reacting almost purely on instinct. The Hummer H6 steering wheel was yanked hard. One side of the vehicle lifted into the air, leaving only one set of wheels clinging to the road, dodging the ram by a hair's breadth. The base vehicle practically scraped past the Hummer and shot forward, so fast it only left behind a violent gust of wind. Inside the Hummer, everyone was thrown around violently. The black-haired guy standing on the roof was almost flung off, barely managing to grab the handrail in time. Bastards! You dare mess with my Savage team. I won't let them off. Inghausen roared after regaining his senses. The black-haired guy on the roof immediately pulled out a sniper rifle, dropped prone, and aimed straight at the base vehicle's tires. In the moment he took aim, his calm demeanor shifted into fanaticism, his eyes darkening as if devoid of life. The base vehicle's tires were crystal clear in his scope. But right at that moment, he felt a deadly, murderous intent lock onto him. Without thinking, he rolled off the roof, clinging to the handrail to dodge. A bullet tore through the air, leaving a long scorch mark on the roof of the off-road vehicle. His heart pounded wildly. An expert. He immediately realized there was a small gun poured on the roof of the base vehicle, its dark muzzle pointed straight at him. It was a Type 81, and that bullet just now was much faster than his own shot, so precise that if he had been half a beat slower, he would be dead. The base vehicle sped off like lightning, leaving the Hummer H6 far behind in just a few seconds, completely vanishing from sight. Stop! Everyone stop! Inghausen roared his orders. After the convoy came to a complete halt, no one dared to disobey. Everyone scrambled to rescue the injured and flip the overturned vehicles back up. What happened, Haidong? Why didn't you shoot out their tires? Inghausen demanded coldly. I didn't have a chance. They have a sharpshooter on their side, too, Haidong replied curtly, but it was enough to startle Inghausen. Good enough to make you afraid to shoot? Boss, this road leads to Shuangwu County. Don't worry, I haven't played all my cards yet. Next time we meet in Shuangwu, I'll show them what real shooting is. Murderous intent flashed in Haidong's eyes. He still had a trump card he hadn't used. The base vehicle continued speeding for a while before gradually slowing down as the acceleration system cooled off. Inside the vehicle, Zhang Hai and Sun Kuan were incredibly hyped. We just rammed straight through them without a hitch. Their sniper didn't even get a chance to fire before I forced him to back off. Zhang Hai laughed out loud, saying that their arrogance came with a price, and eagerly asked me to teach him how to shoot. He claimed that even achieving 1/10 of my skill would be enough. I stepped out of the combat room, holding a piece of roasted mutant meat. Taking a bite, I told him straight up that my shooting skills couldn't be taught, because it was tied to my mutant ability. But everyone's strength definitely needed to be improved. The situation is getting more serious by the day. I looked around the team, bringing up the battle with Yang Feng. If Rin Xiu hadn't used her mind control in time, and the base vehicle hadn't shown up when it did, we definitely would have taken casualties. The atmosphere in the vehicle instantly grew heavy. Everyone remembered the terrifying power of Yang Feng, the strongest opponent the Shi team had ever faced. And in this apocalyptic world, people like him would only become more common. If we didn't keep getting stronger, we might have beaten Yang Feng today, but who could guarantee we'd beat the next guy tomorrow? Brother Jiang, hearing you say that makes me feel really ashamed. Zhang Hai stopped joking around, his voice turning serious. The gap between me and you is getting bigger. If this keeps up, I won't be of any value to the team anymore. He didn't dare say the rest out loud. In the apocalypse, everyone knew the truth. A team like Shi would eventually only keep those who still had value. Even if I didn't kick him out, this world would eliminate him itself. I calmly told them I already had a plan. First, I would have Rin Xiu and Li Yusin conduct a comprehensive check on everyone's mental and physical condition. Then, based on each person's strengths and weaknesses, we'd create a tailored improvement plan. As my own strength grew, I had long noticed the gaps in the team, and the recent battle with Yang Feng had exposed them all. The team wasn't strong enough yet and relied too heavily on the base vehicle. That was a fatal weakness. Therefore, a comprehensive enhancement plan was absolutely necessary. But I also knew very well that this plan required a massive amount of mutant cores and evolution crystals. Getting the biological lab up and running was more urgent than ever, because that was where evolution crystals could be produced. As long as we had enough resources, not only would the team members' abilities upgrade, but my own physical strength would also increase. After being treated by Li Yusin's medical ability, Rin Xiu had almost fully recovered. She began checking everyone's mental strength, while Li Yusin was in charge of assessing their overall health, muscle groups, and mobility. Everything was proceeding exactly according to my plan. Meanwhile, Xiang Shuahai sat quietly in a corner, watching the Shi team with eyes full of admiration. She felt envious of the team's unity and purity, no infighting, no scheming. This was a true group where people could trust each other with their backs to survive the apocalypse. Boss Xiang. A voice beside her made her jump. With her air manipulation ability, she was especially sensitive to fluctuations around her. She turned to me, asking softly, Captain Jiang, is there something you want to talk about? Since that kiss earlier, we had barely spoken to each other. I told her straight up that I wanted to ask her how a mutant could control their abilities more precisely. I had noticed that both she and Yang Feng had a level of ability control that far exceeded the members of my team. Even though Yang Feng died by our hands, I still had to admit that his ability control was the best I had ever seen. That encounter had really opened my eyes. Compared to the entire Shi team, Xiang Shuahai's ability control was also vastly superior. Asking for experience from powerful mutants was obviously much faster than trying to figure it out on my own. I also made it clear that I understood this was valuable experience for any mutant, not something easily taught to outsiders. And if she agreed, she could consider it part of the payment for taking down Yang Feng. Xiang Shuahai tilted her head, her smile so captivating it made me space out for a second. She told me I was being too polite. I had killed Yang Feng, helped her eliminate a massive threat, and even saved her life, so this request was nothing. Even if I wanted a piece of her territory, she wouldn't refuse. As for ability control, she did have some experience, but it needed to be combined with actual combat. When we got back to Shuangwu County, she would personally teach the entire Shuying team. I nodded, my eyes lighting up. Xiang Shuahai used to be a massive star before the apocalypse, but she wasn't arrogant at all. She was decisive in her actions, yet still maintained her gentleness. Even I felt very comfortable talking to her. On the way back to Shuangwu County from the Suhuang Secondary Highway, the journey was quite smooth. Near noon, the number of survivor groups on the road increased, most of them heading in the same direction as us. A few small groups even recklessly attacked the base vehicle, but they were quickly and mercilessly crushed. Xiang Shuahai looked out the window, frowning as she asked why so many people were flocking to Shuangwu. The closer we got, the more she noticed signs of elite survivor groups, along with increasingly obvious violence and chaos. Black skull flags and corpses hung on eagle-shaped wire meshes were extremely bad omens. In the apocalypse, the more people there were, the greater the chaos, and chaos would sooner or later lead to conflict and war. Shuangwu was the territory she had painstakingly built. She didn't want it to turn into a bloody battlefield. From afar, I could already hear chaotic screams echoing from the city gates. As the base vehicle drew closer, a dense sea of people appeared before us, at least over 1,000 survivors crammed together. Most were ordinary people, skinny and filthy, holding crude weapons, mixed with a few well-equipped groups. Their eyes were filled with the desperate desire to survive, staring intently at the city gates. The main gates of Shuangwu County, which were usually wide open, were now tightly shut. In front of the gates, old tires were burning, flames rising high with billowing black smoke. 2 jeeps lay overturned, engulfed in flames, their bodies riddled with bullet holes, with charred corpses still inside. Clearly, someone had tried to attack the gates, and their end was incredibly gruesome. The moat around the wall had been dug deeper, filled with sharp wooden stakes. The barbed wire fences were draped with the bodies of both zombies and humans. Some corpses were still dripping blood, proving they had died recently. No matter how much the crowd outside begged or screamed, the iron gates of Shuangwu County remained tightly shut, with absolutely no response from inside. Finally, an elite group among the survivors couldn't hold back anymore and decided to risk their lives attacking the gates. This time, they were better prepared, temporarily welding iron plates over their vehicle's doors and windows. Turning their vehicle into a massive iron block, they roared straight toward the iron gates. But before the vehicle could even touch the gates, whoosh, a massive chunk of iron plummeted from above with terrifying precision. That iron block weighed at least 600 or 700 caddies, covered in sharp edges, with a chain as thick as a child's arm attached to the back. It looked exactly like an oversized meteor hammer. The iron-plated vehicle was struck like a toy the moment it charged forward. The roof caved in instantly, the chassis bouncing a few times as agonizing screams echoed from inside. Not a single person escaped. They were all crushed into meat paste, blood seeping out from the door seams. The meteor hammer slammed down a few more times until all sounds ceased, leaving the vehicle as nothing more than a pile of scrap metal mixed with flesh and blood. That sight instantly deterred any survivors who still had thoughts of rebelling. No one dared to take another step forward. On the city wall, a giant of a man over 2 meters tall appeared, his body like a small mountain. He was wrapped in gleaming iron chains, the end of which was connected to the meteor hammer from just now. The fat man flashed a smug smile, showing off his buck teeth and a shaved head with only a single tuft of hair in the middle, then slapped the shoulder of the man standing next to him. Captain Luo, looks like it takes me, Yuan Hongliang, to make these brats behave. How about that? Was that a good show? Every slap made Luo Junjiang's body tremble violently, as if his bones were about to break. Luo Junjiang felt incredibly bitter. This fat bastard was clearly trying to assert dominance right in front of him. If Boss Yang were still here, would he dare be this arrogant? But despite his anger, he didn't dare offend him. There were 7 major counties in Subei. Yuan Hongliang was the leader of the strongest faction in Yongye County, with 3 mutants and an elite squad under his command. Before the apocalypse, he was just a pig butcher, but after mutating, his body became abnormally huge, possessing terrifying strength. A single swing of his arm was enough to kill a man. Luo Junjiang could only force a stiff smile and offer a few words of flattery. Hearing this, Yuan Hongliang grew even more smug. He laughed loudly, openly declaring that he would protect Shuangwu County, his words subtly implying that this place already belonged to him. Luo Junjiang could only swallow his anger. Right at that moment, a minibus sped toward the city gates. Yuan Hongliang narrowed his eyes, gripping the chain tightly. Murderous intent surged as he prepared to strike. But in that exact instant, a bizarre gust of wind blew past. Flash! Flash! In the blink of an eye, dozens of cuts appeared on his face and hands. Blood poured down, accompanied by bone-deep pain. He froze, suddenly realizing something. His pupils shrank, and he hastily stopped, not daring to swing the hammer anymore, staring intently at the approaching vehicle. Luo Junjiang also saw the vehicle. His surprise turned into joy, his heart pounding. When he saw Yuan Hongliang injured by the wind, he was even more certain of his guess. Boss Yang had returned. An indescribable joy welled up inside him. The time for payback had finally come. Xiang Shuahai's voice rang out from inside the vehicle, amplified by the air, spreading hundreds of meters away. Fatty Yuan, you've got some nerve. Since when do my subordinates need your protection? Shuangwu County is my territory, Xiang Shuahai's. As soon as the words fell, the news of Boss Yang's return instantly spread throughout the county. The iron gates quickly opened, and the bus drove inside. The vehicle stopped on a street, and I stepped out along with Xiang Shuahai and the Shering team. Returning to Shuangwu, I noticed the place was much more desolate. The streets were empty, the trading stalls were gone, shops were closed tight, and many places had been smashed up, with clear signs of looting. A tense atmosphere hung over everything. I instinctively rested my hand on the Type 54 in my pocket, and the other members simultaneously went on high alert. Yuan Hongliang walked down from the city wall. He forced a smile and threw out a teasing remark, acting as if he hadn't just been injured. But Xiang Shuahai completely ignored him. Her icy glare made him both angry and wary. He knew her reputation and strength very well, especially her air manipulation ability, which made him afraid to act rashly. Luo Junjiang stood nearby, so emotional his eyes were red. Boss Yang had returned. Just her presence alone completely changed the situation. Boss Yang, I failed you. Luo Junjiang took off his glasses, his voice trembling. Xiang Shuahai coldly asked why Yuan Hongliang and his people were here. Luo Junjiang explained. After she left, the floods wreaked havoc, making Shuangwu one of the rare safe havens. Hordes of zombies and mutated beasts forced them to close the gates. Then, elite teams from other places came seeking refuge. He and Hui Ming couldn't hold the line, and eventually let them flood in. Hearing Hui Ming's name, Xiang Shuahai immediately asked about him. Luo Junjiang lowered his head, saying Hui Ming had died while trying to stop a conflict. Xiang Shuahai's expression instantly darkened. She knew Hui Ming's defensive capabilities well. His death was absolutely not that simple. Her eyes, sharp as knives, locked onto Yuan Hongliang. The fat man broke into a cold sweat, hastily defending himself, claiming it was just an accident and had nothing to do with his team. As he spoke, Yuan Hongliang secretly observed the Shering team beside me. Aside from Xiang Shuahai and the long-legged girl with a decent ability, the rest didn't look like much. There was even an old man and a young guy with no abilities. He sneered inwardly. If this was all she had, Xiang Shuahai didn't seem as terrifying as before. Yuan Hongliang glanced at me and the Shering team, his gaze greedy and sinister. Beside me, Rin Xiu also subtly swept her eyes over him. Immediately after, her voice echoed in my mind, cold and disgusted. This guy is truly filthy and dark inside. With her mental abilities, Rin Xiu could feel it clearly. As Yuan Hongliang observed us, his mind was churning with vicious and malicious thoughts. It wasn't just him. The unfamiliar faces around us also showed clear hostility. I stayed silent, but I already had a basic read on the situation. Shuangwu County was no longer entirely in Xiang Shuahai's hands. The Great Flood was like driving a pack of starving wolves into this place. Now, those wolves were lurking, wanting to tear off a piece of meat and seize Xiang Shuahai's territory. Once she returned to reclaim her rights, conflict with the elite groups from outside was inevitable. Traveling with her, my Shering team was naturally seen as the enemy too. In reality, there was no unity even among those survivor groups. They were fighting each other for their own interests. Land was lost, and Shuangwu was too small to fit everyone, so the excess would be eliminated. The fewer competitors, the better. Xiang Shuahai must have been calculating a lot in her head as well. Finally, she managed to suppress her anger, deciding to observe a bit more before taking action. After Hui Ming's death, she didn't have many powerful mutants left under her command. She turned to Yuan Hongliang, her voice cold. Fatty Yuan, visitors are guests. I'll host a banquet tonight. Tell the leaders of the other groups to meet at Qinlu at 5:30 p.m. She needed to meet these outsiders face to face. Yuan Hongliang smiled, so wide his eyes disappeared, nodding repeatedly, outwardly acting respectful. He said that since Boss Yang was back, she was naturally the master of Shuangwu, then hurried off to deliver the message. It was exactly that fake attitude that made Xiang Shuahai even more suspicious and fueled her murderous intent. She understood that fat bastard's true nature all too well, a wolf in sheep's clothing. Once Yuan Hongliang left, Xiang Shuahai sighed softly and looked at me. She said I had clearly seen the chaotic state of Shuangwu, and she would pay us in advance. To her, once the conflict broke out, the Shering team would be the deciding factor. Despite her confidence, she knew she had been heavily injured by Yang Feng. Her current strength was less than a third of what it used to be, and the duration she could use her abilities was shortened. In this condition, not only would it be hard to deal with the outside groups, but even wiping out Yuan Hongliang's crew would be a massive challenge. Because of this, she needed to maintain her alliance with us, and offering benefits was the most surefire way. I told her straight up there was no need to be polite. We had already received enough reward for killing Yang Feng, and we had also gotten a lead on Ren Yen's whereabouts. I had no intention of sharing the spoils from Yang Feng, because those mutant crystals were essential for the team. Even so, I still wanted to stay in Shuangwu, because with the current flooding, this place was a rare safe haven on the route I needed to take. Xiang Shuahai looked at me in silence for a long time, her gaze so deep it felt like she was trying to see right through my thoughts. A hint of worry flashed across her face, and then her aura suddenly shifted, becoming softer, like a girl in need of someone to lean on. She said to consider this payment a protection fee in advance, because she needed the Shering team's help to deal with the survivor groups that had infiltrated Shuangwu. But right after, her eyes turned sharp again, radiating murderous intent. It wasn't just about protection. She wanted to take back full control. I understood perfectly. Xiang Shuahai had seen through the situation. Shuangwu had practically slipped from her grasp. The elite groups forced here by the flood were like starving wolves. If they didn't bite off some profit, they couldn't survive. She absolutely wouldn't accept being torn apart. In the apocalypse, the law of the jungle dictated that only the strong survived. If you wanted to live, you had to kill. I watched Yuan Hongliang's retreating figure, having no desire to let a venomous snake like him stay alive nearby either. Our goals didn't conflict, and there were benefits to be had. I had no reason to refuse. I nodded, saying the Shering team would take the job. To be honest, I didn't want to see Xiang Shuahai die either. The memory of the kiss in the base vehicle suddenly surfaced, the sweet aftertaste still lingering on my lips. Maybe that was also part of the reason I agreed. Beside us, Luo Junjiang clenched his fists, trembling with excitement. It worked. He had witnessed the Shering team's strength with his own eyes. They had easily wiped out Boss Wu's crew, and now this force would become the backbone of the local faction. That also made him feel less guilty about letting the outside wolves in. Suddenly, Luo Junjiang remembered something and asked where the Zilong and Baohua teams were. Both teams had followed Xiang Shuahai to fight Yang Feng, but this time, none of them had returned. A terrifying guess flashed through his mind. Xiang Shuahai looked slightly surprised, a cold glint flashing in her eyes, before she calmly stated that they were all dead. Even though he had vaguely anticipated it, Luo Junjiang was still stunned. Boss Wu's crew couldn't even compare to those two teams, yet they were all dead. Then what about Yang Feng? I coldly added that Yang Feng was dead. The news struck like a bolt of lightning. Xiang Shuahai confirmed it. The Shuying team and I had killed him, and even his military base might have been washed away by the flood. Yang Feng is dead. A massive wave of emotion surged in Luo Junjiang's heart. That was the true emperor of Subei, the man standing at the pinnacle of power. And yet he had been wiped out. He didn't doubt it for a second, because Xiang Shuahai returning safely was the clearest proof. When this news spread, Shuangwu would be in an uproar. Compared to a tiger like Yang Feng, those starving wolves were nothing. Luo Junjiang finally felt like he could hold his head high. The way he looked at me and the Shuying team was full of awe. He only had one clear thought in his mind. Thank God he hadn't offended us. Teaming up with the Shuying team was probably the best decision of his life. Crack! A blinding flash of lightning suddenly tore through the previously clear sky, followed immediately by the heavy rumble of thunder. In the distant horizon, dark clouds rolled in thick and fast. A strong wind kicked up, sweeping away fallen leaves and making clothes flap wildly. It's going to rain again. Sun Xuanxin looked up at the sky, his eyes full of worry. The floodwaters were still rising. If the rain continued, the situation would definitely get worse. If this rain didn't stop, even more people from other areas would flock to Shuangwu County. Luo Junjiang pushed up his glasses, his face gloomy. Right now, almost every day there were survivors risking their lives to attack the city gates. Using extreme measures could only hold them off temporarily. Under the pressure of survival and the flood, people would only get more desperate. Now, the gates, the walls, and the patrol teams had to operate 24/7 to stop people from sneaking in. The strong wind blew Xiang Shuahai's long black hair around. She reached up and tucked a strand behind her ear. Even a small gesture like that exuded an indescribable charm, leaving Luo Junjiang staring blankly. How's the situation inside the city? Xiang Shuahai asked. Inside the city, it's very serious. Luo Junjiang snapped out of it and hurriedly gave a detailed report. The current state of Shuangwu County could be summed up in one word: terrible. The root cause was the population explosion. Originally, the survivors in the county, including Xiang Shuahai's team and the merchant caravans, only numbered a few thousand. But after the massive flood, people poured in from all directions. Some teams came to trade and just ended up staying. By the time they closed the gates, the population had tripled, nearing 10,000 people. 10,000 mouths to feed was a terrifying burden, especially when food reserves were insufficient. Hunger brought chaos. Fights over food, weapons, and women broke out constantly. Luo Junjiang had tried to suppress it multiple times, but to no avail. Later, 6 or 7 elite teams from neighboring counties arrived. Each team had a few hundred people, the strongest having 300 to 400, all possessing formidable mutants. Some even had reputations rivaling Xiang Shuahai's. With the meager forces in the city, Luo Junjiang didn't dare start a conflict and could only let them in. From then on, the situation became even more chaotic. Traitors appeared in the defense force, and there were even spies. The food belonging to Xiang Shuahai's faction was seized by the outside groups, who pretended to buy it with a few rusty guns. If Xiang Shuahai had returned any later, the food warehouse would probably have been completely taken over. Just this morning, Luo Junjiang received reports of people scouting the warehouse, forcing him to divert most of his defense forces there. That was why we barely saw any of Xiang Shuahai's subordinates when we entered the city. After hearing this, I spoke up. If Boss Xiang really wants to pay us in advance, how about exchanging it for food, fuel, and water transport vehicles? Our vehicles need to restock on supplies. From Xinghai to Subei, there were no supply points along the way, and after this flood, finding fuel was even harder. Meanwhile, the clash with Yang Feng had consumed quite a bit of gas. As for water transport, that was just in case of emergencies, since the base vehicle couldn't travel underwater for long. Luo Junjiang grimaced, because those were the rarest goods of all. But Xiang Shuahai didn't hesitate at all. She agreed immediately and told me to give Luo Junjiang a list. To her, the Shering team was the key. Without us, she might not even be able to keep her own life. I nodded. Working with someone this decisive really saved a lot of headaches. Luo Junjiang, on the other hand, was miserable because water transport vehicles weren't readily available. But since a promise was made, he had no choice but to figure it out. Right at that moment, the roar of engines echoed from outside the city wall. "Open the gates. Open them right now. If you're slow, I'll blow your brains out," a rough voice shouted. The iron gates opened, and over a dozen modified motorcycles rushed in, flying gray flags with a blood-stained giant bear emblem. Iron chains dangled from the bikes, dragging animal carcasses and all sorts of looted goods. The tattooed riders glared arrogantly, whooping and hollering as they sped past us, leaving behind a cloud of dust. Luo Junjiang frowned and explained that it was the motorcycle gang from the Giant Bear team of Jiawan County, just returning from a raid. Xiang Shuahai scowled in annoyance. What pissed her off the most was the arrogant attitude of these outside groups, completely disregarding the Shuangwu Defense Force. This was only the tip of the iceberg, but it was enough to show how unruly they were. She turned to me, her expression softening, and told Luo Junjiang to take us to rest first. The supplies would be delivered later. I thanked her because the Shering team had just been through a massive battle, and everyone needed rest. In the center of Shuangwu County stood a tall marble building, formerly the government headquarters before the apocalypse. Right now, the open courtyard in front was packed with people. All sorts of vehicles were parked in the courtyard, from pickup trucks to heavy-duty rigs. On every vehicle, survivors carried knives, swords, and all kinds of crude weapons. Several bonfires crackled brightly, roasting massive chunks of golden mutant beast meat. Fat dripped down with a sizzle, and the rich, gamey smell filled the air. In the center area, a large iron cage held several young, emaciated girls in torn clothes, their faces pale. They were forced to contort their bodies to entertain the muscular men surrounding them. Nearby, a few corpses lay haphazardly on the ground, but no one bothered to spare them a glance. A chaotic, barbaric, and noisy atmosphere engulfed the entire courtyard. Inside the building, in the first-floor lobby, 7 armchairs were arranged around a large fire. In the middle, a shirtless, sweating man was using a large knife to roast a giant mutant pig leg, the aroma of the meat overwhelmingly strong. Only one of the 7 chairs was empty. When Yuan Hongliang walked in, the meat was just finished, and plates of it were being served. "Fatty Yuan, you've got a sharp nose. Showing up right at mealtime. Did you take care of the trash outside?" The man sitting in the northeast corner spoke up. He was short but heavily built, with a large hooked nose, a precious cigarette dangling from his lips in these flooded times. Watching him blow smoke, the guys standing behind him couldn't help but drool. "That trash is nothing." Yuan Hongliang sneered, plopping down into his chair, grabbing a handful of meat and chewing loudly. The iron chains wrapped around his body dragged on the floor, clanking noisily. "One swing of my hammer, and they're all dead." Saying that, he slapped his thigh. "But there's something else. You guys probably heard already. Boss Xiang is back." The entire hall instantly fell silent. A few guys chewing meat stopped, all eyes turning to Yuan Hongliang. Immediately after, a cold voice rang out. "So what if Xiang Shuahai is back? We still eat, play, and loot like normal. Everything's already been decided. Tonight, we wash this county in blood. She came back at the perfect time. I've been wanting a taste of her for a while." Jiang Zhongyuan, a middle-aged man with a long, horse-like face, smiled sinisterly. On his lap, a woman was having her breasts squeezed hard, in pain but still forcing a smile. Mocking laughter echoed through the room. Someone said Xiang Shuahai wasn't a problem. They had over 30 mutants on their side. Even Yang Feng wouldn't be a threat. All they cared about was how to divide the food after killing everyone, because who knew when this flood would recede? The group chatted excitedly, none of them taking Xiang Shuahai seriously. Yuan Hongliang added between bites that Xiang Shuahai had invited them to meet at Qinlu at 5:30. Some sneered, some were curious, and some looked intrigued. At that moment, an old man coughed lightly. "Don't underestimate Xiang Shuahai. Her ability is very strong. I heard she took the Zilong and Baohua teams with her this time. Those 2 teams combined have 8 mutants, and their captains are no pushovers either." Fatty Yuan, Did you see them? The old man had snow-white hair, a body as solid as rock, white eyebrows, and piercing blue eyes like a wolf's. Yuan Hongliang didn't dare act out of line in front of him. He smiled and replied that Xiang Shuahai only brought back a few people, and their strength was negligible. The strong girl was injured, and the Zilong and Baohua teams were nowhere to be seen. Elder Chiu nodded thoughtfully. Someone sneered, guessing that those two teams were probably wiped out, meaning Xiang Shuahai was nothing to worry about. Right at that moment, a clap of thunder boomed, shaking the hall. Heavy rain began to pour outside. The sky darkened. Zhang Hai stood watching the rain, picking his teeth and letting out an "oh," casually remarking that it was raining hard. The Shering team had eaten their fill and rested well. I stood on the second-floor balcony, listening to the rain pattering on the roof tiles. Looking out from here, the lakes of the past had turned into a vast ocean, massive waves crashing against the high banks near Shuangwu County. A knock came from the door. Luo Junjiang said Boss Yang told him to take us to Qinlu. I opened the door and told him to lead the way. Sun Kuan cheered excitedly, his eyes shining. To him, as long as he followed me, it seemed there was nothing left to fear. The streets of Shuangwu County were narrow and packed with people. Sitting in the car, I saw skinny, hollow-cheeked survivors huddled under the eaves. Holding hose, they worked while hurriedly stuffing dry, mixed grain flour cakes into their mouths. In this place, as long as you could stand, you had to go out and work, reinforcing the walls, building defensive structures. Shuangwu County didn't feed useless people right now, yet there were still many who couldn't even get a single bite to eat. Quite a few people lay curled up under ruined storefronts to escape the rain, too exhausted to stand. Some were even injured, having lost their ability to work, lying helplessly in the muddy rainwater. Their eyes followed those eating cakes, silently waiting for death to approach. Luo Junjiang led a large squad of the city defense force, armed with crude weapons like guns, machetes, iron pipes, and steel bars, trailing behind a few pickup trucks, heading straight for Qinlu. I sat in the minibus with Xiang Shuahai, leading the convoy. The cramped streets made it hard for the bus to move, but I had learned my lesson. Whenever possible, I always kept the base vehicle close behind, absolutely refusing to let it get separated. The situation in Shuangwu County was incredibly complex. We couldn't afford even the slightest slip-up, especially with injured members in the Shering team. Jiang Zhuiying, one of our main pillars, had injured her arm, significantly reducing her combat power. Because of this, the base vehicle became an even more crucial backup plan. They're here. Haha. And they even brought that piece of junk bus. Is Xiang Shuahai so broke now that she has to use this thing to show off? Up in Qinlu, the 7 leaders of the elite survivor groups had all gathered. Jiang Zhongyuan, with his long horse face, leaned against the Jiangnan-style carved railing, looking down at the bus approaching in the rain with eyes full of mockery. Bringing a beat-up bus in this situation, what exactly was she trying to pull? When Xiang Shuahai and I stepped off the bus and entered Qinlu, the others finally took their seats, leaving only one empty spot in the corner. I walked closely beside her, saying nothing but constantly observing our surroundings. Reaching the second floor and seeing the setup inside, I could only sneer in my heart. In the middle of the room was a long table. Both sides and the head seat were full, leaving only a spot in the northeast corner. Right under a hole in the ceiling, rainwater dripped down, dark, damp, and incredibly uncomfortable. Xiang Shuahai walked in, but Yuan Hongliang and the others acted like they didn't even see her. Some casually cleaned their rifles, while others vulgarly groped the women with them. Luo Junjiang, standing beside me, couldn't hold back his anger. Jiuhozi, how the hell do you do things? Didn't I tell you to arrange the banquet? Why is Boss Yang seated over there? He grabbed a skinny middle-aged man by the door and yelled, feeling deeply ashamed because he had entrusted the arrangements to Jiuhozi. I did arrange it, but the bosses arrived early and refused to sit where I told them. That spot in the northeast corner wasn't even there originally. They deliberately threw a chair over there. Jiuhozi explained with a grimace. He had intended for Xiang Shuahai to sit at the head of the table, but the 7 leaders had taken all the good seats. They purposely left a dark corner to humiliate her, and he hadn't dared to fight back. Xiang Shuahai remained calm, her high heels clicking softly as she walked toward the long table. Jiang Zhongyuan, still massaging the woman in his lap, shot her a mocking glance, his lecherous eyes sweeping her from head to toe. The other leaders also watched secretly, waiting to see how she would embarrass herself. Sitting or not sitting, both were awkward. Today she wore a tight black outfit, a red belt hugging her waist, looking both fierce and alluring. Suddenly, her long, slender legs swung up and slammed down hard on the table. As a mutant, backed by her ability, the kick was terrifyingly powerful. Crash! The solid wooden table shattered into pieces, splinters flying everywhere. Everyone jumped up in shock, glaring at her warily. "Boss Yang, what are you doing?" The short guy closest to her got a face full of wood splinters, looking both furious and defensive. "Boss Yang, didn't you invite us here to talk? Is this attitude supposed to be a provocation?" A massive guy stood up with a cold sneer. The other captains also glared at her with icy eyes. "Of course we're here to talk. But did you all forget whose territory this is? If you're a dragon, you coil up for me. If you're a tiger, you lie down at my feet today." Xiang Shuahai roared, grinding out every word through her teeth. Yuan Hongliang slowly stood up. "Boss Yang, you asked me to pass a message, and I did. Everyone here showed up. If you're trying to set up a Hongmin banquet today, our people aren't the type to shy away from trouble." The table and chairs were smashed, everyone was covered in sawdust, and there was no way to sit back down. The other leaders also stood up, their eyes cold. Their plan was originally to wipe out Xiang Shuahai's people tonight. Now that she had broken the ice herself, it made it even easier for them to tear everything apart. Qinlu was the center of Yushui County, a traditional Chinese-style hotel. The wooden windows on all four sides were wide open. All around, on the roofs of the opposite buildings, people were standing, holding all sorts of weapons, a chilling murderous intent filling the air. Down on the street, groups of people swarmed up. Luo Junjiang, standing guard at the door, saw this clearly. His face changed, and he leaned in close to Xiang Shuahai's ear, whispering a few words. She just sneered, seemingly having expected this all along. "Boss Xiang, with this many people, who do you think really calls the shots in Shuangwu County? Even when Yang Feng brought his men here, he had to show us some respect." Jiang Zhongyan stood up smugly, pushing the woman beside him away, staring at her brazenly. I took a step forward, my voice as cold as ice. "Yang Feng, you want a dead man to show you respect?" The entire room froze. Everyone's eyes simultaneously locked onto me. Xiang Shuahai stepped aside, while Jiang Zhongyuan couldn't hide his fury. He clenched his fists, his knuckles cracking, his threatening gaze glued to me. He snorted, speaking with a tone full of contempt. "Boss Yang, is this your little boy toy? Kid, you can eat whatever you want, but you can't just spout whatever bullshit comes to mind." Actually, from the moment I walked in with Xiang Shuahai, Jiang Zhongyuan had noticed me. But he didn't sense any strong mutant energy fluctuations from me, so he naturally felt contempt. Now, hearing my provocation and seeing that Xiang Shuahai didn't stop me, he immediately realized my position in her team wasn't low. In this apocalyptic world, what right did a survivor without abilities have to speak up? To them, it felt like a little rabbit daring to provoke a pack of tigers. In the hall, the eyes of the other survivor group leaders turned cold, their murderous intent quietly rising. They were already prepared to tear up their relationship with Xiang Shuahai, so taking this chance to kill me first wasn't a bad idea. As long as I died, Xiang Shuahai would likely be forced to bow her head and cooperate. But before anyone could make a move, I took the initiative and stepped forward. A gleaming Type 54 pistol suddenly appeared in my hand, its dark muzzle pointed straight at Jiang Zhongyuan. My draw was so fast he didn't even have time to react. His eyes widened instantly, the feeling of impending death making his entire body stiffen. Just as he tried to dodge, 3 sharp gunshots rang out right next to his ear. His heart felt like it stopped beating, his soul seemingly ripped from his body. 3 scorching streaks of heat grazed his scalp, burning painfully, as wood splinters shot straight into his face and neck. Jiang Zhongyuan stumbled back in panic. Luckily, a few of his trusted men nearby caught him in time, yelling "Boss!" in alarm. Everything happened so fast that the entire hall fell into a dead silence. No one expected me to fire so suddenly, let alone so fast and accurately. Only then did Jiang Zhongyuan clearly feel that both sides of his scalp and the top of his head had been scorched by the bullets. 3 patches of hair had been shot clean off, smoke rising from them. His thick hair was ruined like a bird's nest, and blood seeped out, stinging painfully. Only then did the rest of the crowd snap out of it, many immediately reaching for their guns. But in a split second, a series of gunshots rang out, and guns clattered to the floor. Everyone who had just raised a gun was shot in the hand. Blood splattered everywhere, and agonizing screams echoed through the hall. By now, I had another Type 54 pistol in my other hand. The 2 muzzles pointed in different directions, coldly locking down the entire hall. Just now, I had fired continuously with both hands, not missing a single person who tried to draw a weapon. My shooting skills instantly overwhelmed everyone, to the point where even the ambushers on the surrounding buildings didn't dare to fire. In their eyes, I had just casually waved my hands, not even needing to look at my targets. Yet every single bullet accurately hit the enemy's hand, as if I had eyes everywhere. That speed and precision sent chills down everyone's spine. They all shared the same thought. If they actually raised a gun at me, their own heads would explode the very next second. Even though there were quite a few mutants here, facing marksmanship like this, no one dared to underestimate it. Xiang Shuahai, what is the meaning of this? Jiang Zhongyuan roared, his face burning from being humiliated in front of everyone. Immediately after, his body suddenly swelled up. His clothes ripped to shreds as thick fur rapidly grew all over him, and in no time, he transformed into a massive grizzly bear. Even though I wasn't short, standing in front of that massive figure, I only reached his stomach. The pressure bearing down made the air feel thick. Luo Junjiang whispered from the side, transformation ability. I knew this type of ability well. It was a common type in the apocalypse. It allowed the user to transform into a creature with the power of a beast, possessing strength, defense, and vitality far beyond ordinary humans. In the cramped space of the hall, Jiang Zhongyuan's massive body created a terrifying pressure, radiating a violent aura. His bloodshot eyes looked like they wanted to swallow someone alive. Xiang Shuahai's eyes suddenly sharpened. Fierce winds whipped up around her, and within the gale, countless thin, deadly wind blades flickered. Everyone's expressions changed simultaneously. They quickly glanced at the ambushers outside. Just one wrong move, and a massive battle would instantly break out. Luo Junjiang and the city defense force were also tense to the extreme, ready to strike. Down on the street below, the Shuangwu defense force was in a standoff with the outside survivors, both sides like bowstrings about to snap. Just as the atmosphere was about to spiral out of control, Elder Chiu, with his piercing blue eyes, slowly stepped out and stood across from me. He looked at me for a moment before speaking in a low voice. Young man, nice shooting. With a marksman like you, no wonder Xiang Shuahai is so confident. Everyone, calm down. We came here to negotiate, so let's negotiate properly. No one saw clearly how Elder Chiu moved. It just felt like he blurred for a second and was suddenly standing between Xiang Shuahai and Jiang Zhongyuan, directly cutting off the standoff between the two. My eyes flickered, because I had clearly seen Elder Chiu's incredibly subtle movements just now. Everything happened so fast that the people around only saw a blur. Just now, Elder Chiu had bent his knees, continuously tapping the ground and springing forward several times. His footwork was bizarre, but his speed was terrifyingly fast. I couldn't help but feel shocked. This was the first time I had encountered such a bizarre mutant. This old man clearly didn't just have an ability. He was also a master of combat techniques, possibly martial arts or Muay Thai, combined with explosive strength far beyond a normal person's. Abilities combined with technique. Elder Chiu was absolutely not someone to be underestimated. Boom. Suddenly, a massive explosion echoed from afar, shaking the entire area. Xiang Shuahai's expression instantly changed. She rushed to the balcony, looking toward the sound through the heavy rain. The explosion came from the tightly shut gates of Shuangwu County, an incredibly sensitive location. If the gates were breached and the survivors flooded in, it could still be controlled. But if a massive horde of zombies or mutated monsters charged in at the same time, the situation would instantly become extremely dangerous. Right at that moment, Ren Shiyu's voice echoed in my mind. She reported that a very strong mental fluctuation had appeared near the city gates. It was something extremely dangerous, like a mutated zombie. Ren Xiu was still in the base vehicle with Jiang Zhuiying and Li Yusen. As a mental-type mutant, she constantly monitored the surrounding fluctuations. Thanks to her, I didn't have to worry about being ambushed. I completely trusted Ren Xiu's judgment, because I had witnessed the terrifying power of a mutated zombie with my own eyes. The most terrifying thing about them wasn't just their destructive power, but their ability to command an entire horde of zombies. I immediately turned to Xiang Shuahai, my voice grave, telling her that a mutated zombie had appeared near the gates and we needed to get there quickly to defend it. Her face instantly grew heavy. Another violent explosion rang out. Through the pitch-black rain, a massive fire flared up in the distance, blindingly bright. I quickly deduced it was a gas tank explosion, because the thick black smoke and raging flames were so intense that even the heavy rain couldn't put them out. It was clearly fuel burning. A few more explosions followed, sending tires flying into the air from the shockwaves. Right after, a skinny city guard, completely drenched, rushed in a panic to report. He said a massive number of zombies were attacking the gates, and at the same time, a group of survivors had used a truck to ram the gates in a desperate attempt to force them open. The gates had been blown open. The men only had time to block it with sandbags, but they couldn't hold out for long. The unconcealed panic on his face was enough to show just how critical the situation outside was. If they opened the gates, the zombies would flood in. But if they didn't, the survivors outside would fight to the death to get in. Xiang Shuahai immediately looked at me, her voice dropping as she said we had to get there fast. No matter what, we couldn't let the zombies in. Otherwise, the already chaotic Shuangwu County would turn into a hell full of blood and corpses. I didn't want this place to fall either, because compared to the outside, inside the city was still much safer. If Shuangwu County collapsed, my future travels would become incredibly troublesome. Before leaving, Xiang Shuahai glanced at the other leaders and coldly reminded them that if the zombies got in, no one would escape. She was only going to protect her own people. After we left Qinlu, the remaining leaders just looked at each other, because everyone understood exactly how serious the situation was. In a sense, their fate was tied to Shuangwu County. Other than this place, there were no safe areas left nearby to hide from the zombies, especially with the possibility of a mutated zombie appearing, something they had all faced before and knew the terror of. In the heavy atmosphere, someone asked Elder Chiu for his opinion. All eyes turned to him. Jiang Zhongyuan suddenly spoke up, saying that Xiang Shuahai had claimed to have killed Yang Feng. It was very likely true, because you couldn't just make something like that up. If they really had the strength to kill Yang Feng, then Xiang Shuahai and that kid marksman were extremely dangerous. As soon as he finished, the other leaders nodded one after another. Some thought Xiang Shuahai and her crew couldn't be left alive. Others emphasized that they couldn't let the zombies in either, because all their assets were here. Elder Chiu remained calm, a sharp glint flashing in his eyes. He slowly concluded that they definitely had to go. As for whether to fight and how to fight, they would decide based on the situation. In the raging storm, the minibus sped through the narrow streets. Under my and Ying's control, the base vehicle moved as nimbly as a fish in water, quickly approaching the city gates. Before even stepping out of the vehicle, I could clearly hear the terrifying roars mixed with agonizing screams echoing from outside. The survivors near the gates were fleeing in panic, their faces pale with terror at the sight of the relentless zombie horde attacking. Xiang Shuahai and I immediately opened the doors and jumped out. Zhang Hai and Sun Kuan followed closely behind, carrying Type 97 shotguns. In this kind of siege battle, close-quarters combat with zombies was unavoidable, and shotguns were clearly much more effective at close range than other firearms. The gates of Shuangwu County were piled high with sandbags. Originally meant for flood control, they had now become the final line of defense. The heavy iron gates were dyed an eerie red in the darkness from being licked by flames. Fortunately, they were thick enough not to be completely burned through yet. On the city wall, thick black smoke billowed, and screams echoed endlessly. The people inside the city were straining to carry sandbags to block the entrance. I had only taken a few steps when I caught a familiar scent. Turning around, I saw Jiang Zhuiying. I sighed silently. This little sister of mine had a passion for fighting that made people uneasy. Her hands were still wrapped in bandages like a mummy. She couldn't even hold her custom-made saber, yet she still followed me to the battlefield. I couldn't help but tell her to go back since her wounds hadn't healed, but Juing just smiled mischievously. She said the rain made it easier to conduct electricity, then showed me the blue sparks flashing in her palm. Her hands couldn't handle heavy movements yet, but light activity was fine. I knew I couldn't completely stop her, so I gave in and told her to stay in the back. She was to act as rear support and protect Li Yusin and Rin Xiu in the vehicle, especially since it would be hard for her to fight if mutated zombies appeared. Zhu Ying agreed immediately, as long as she wasn't left behind. Besides, she understood how critical the situation was. Amidst the wind and rain, I suddenly caught an unusual sound. A sniper rifle. I recognized it instantly, as I was all too familiar with that sound. On the city wall right above, a guard was blown off into the mud, not even having time to scream. I saw it clearly. His body was practically shredded, his upper half gone. That could only be the destructive power of a heavy sniper rifle, maybe even armor-piercing rounds. I immediately signaled a warning to Xiang Shuahai. She nodded, her expression grave. At the base of the wall, several guards had already been shot down, killed instantly with horrific gaping holes in their bodies. The presence of a sniper meant the survivors outside the gates had elites among them, making them extremely hard to deal with. The people on the wall didn't dare poke their heads out anymore, but they couldn't retreat either, because behind them was Shuangwu County and their families. I contacted Rin Xiu in my mind, asking her to help pinpoint the sniper's location. She reassured me that as soon as the enemy showed themselves, she would lock onto them. Right then, the base vehicle approached the city gates. Xiang Shuahai and I climbed the wall, finding a concealed spot to observe. The scene outside was nothing short of hell on earth. A heavy truck had been burned to a pile of scrap metal, flames still roaring in the rain. Not far away, raging floodwaters surged over the artificial levee surrounding the county, the water level much higher than before. The floodwaters were dyed a dark red, littered with corpses. There were drowned bodies, mangled bodies, and among them, blood-soaked zombies growling madly. Further out, hordes of zombies besieged the city gates. On the murky water, white foam floated. Many zombies bobbed on the surface, heads tilted back, bodies submerged, drifting with the current. Some even clung to floating debris, howling toward Shuangwu County as they drifted. I shuddered, realizing that despite lacking intelligence, they still retained a certain survival instinct. My eyes narrowed as I spotted a pack of wild dogs. The mutated alpha, with a sharp horn in the middle of its forehead, was gnawing on the corpse of a survivor outside the gates. It was the exact same pack of wild dogs I had encountered while fleeing Yangfeng's base, back when we were chased by that giant mutated water snake. If this pack was here, then that aquatic monster was very likely nearby as well. Just thinking about it sent a chill down my spine. Inside the barbed wire fence, a massive number of survivors had crammed in. They relied on abandoned cars, tires, and makeshift trenches, holding weapons and forming small groups to hold their ground. The temporary barricades stopped the zombie horde from rushing in immediately, leaving them to growl madly outside, while the rain and floodwaters continued to rise. The survivors outside the gates were mostly ordinary people with some combat ability or common mutants. There were also a few stronger teams that had banded together, using abandoned cars as cover to return fire or charging forward with blades to slaughter the incoming zombies. But those with absolutely no combat ability, like women holding babies, children, and the elderly, were packed tightly against the city gates, crying miserably. They originally belonged to other factions and shelters, but when the floodwaters came, they were driven out of the places once considered safe. Facing the towering city walls, their eyes held nothing but despair. That tightly shut iron gate was the dividing line between life and death. Open the gates. I'm begging you, open the gates. Please open the gates. I have a baby. I can work. I'll do anything. Just let me in. The wailing was endless. Many fell to their knees before the gates. In the face of life and death, dignity became pitifully insignificant. An exhausted, one-armed old man leaned against the base of the wall, stroking his young grandson's mud-caked hair. His voice hoarse, he said that dying was fine too. Once dead, they would reunite with his parents and never have to suffer hunger or thirst again. The little boy whimpered, crying as he said he didn't want to die. He still wanted to drink Coca-Cola. I lay in the crevice of the wall, letting the cold rain pound against my head, my heart heavy as I listened to every word. Beside me, Xiang Shuehai sighed softly, her eyes reflecting a deep sorrow. She whispered, asking me, or perhaps herself, when this era would finally come to an end. I didn't answer. I just quietly pulled out the Type 81 from my back, the black barrel poking out of the crevice, my entire focus directed forward. Right then, an angry roar echoed from outside the gates. Inghausen of the Savage Squad loudly threatened that if they didn't open the gates, he would smash them down and let the zombies flood and so everyone could die together. About 30 meters from the gates, right by the floodwaters, his squad was fighting desperately. They used heavy trucks and off-road vehicles as a defensive wall, combining tires and other items to form a barricade. Outside, zombies were piled over a meter high, and many of their elite members had been gruesomely bitten to death. Inside the vehicle barricade, empty shell casings and dulled blades littered the ground. Amidst the zombie horde, Inghausen radiated scorching heat, fighting like a madman. His skin was bright red, his body covered in blood. Whenever he grabbed a zombie, its body instantly turned red as if boiled, then smoked and burst into flames before dying. His ability could incinerate anything he touched, including the fat inside living creatures. It was bizarre and consumed a terrifying amount of stamina. After hours of fighting, he was nearly exhausted, yet the gates remained tightly shut, causing his fury to erupt. Someone in his squad anxiously said that they couldn't keep this up. There weren't just zombies, but monsters in the water too. Inghausen roared, incinerating another zombie before charging toward the car barricade, where many ordinary, non-combatant survivors were gathered. He grabbed a scrawny, malnourished man, lifted him up, and forced him to drive a heavy truck straight into the city gates. The man turned pale with fear because someone had been forced to do this earlier and was burned to ashes. His wife, holding their baby, fell to her knees, hugging Inghausen's leg and begging in tears, but he just sneered and kicked the mother and child away. Pointing his gun at the woman in the mud, he coldly threatened that if the man didn't drive, his wife and child would die. Finally, the desperate man, trembling, climbed into the truck. All of this fell into the eyes of Xiang Shuehai and me. Even though we couldn't hear the words clearly, Inghausen's ruthless actions were obvious. Xiang Shuehai gritted her teeth, her eyes full of murderous intent, cursing him as a bastard. Right then, I suddenly said we should open the gates. She turned to look at me, stunned, asking if I knew the consequences of that. If the zombies flooded in, the death toll wouldn't just be limited to those outside. I knew she wasn't heartless. Under her management, Shuangwu County was at least a relatively safe haven for ordinary people. But right now, besides the zombies, there were mutated beasts and wild dogs lurking. Once they broke in, the consequences would be unimaginable. I calmly said that we only needed to open the gates for a short time, saving as many as we could. And during that time, the Shearing Squad would ensure no zombies or mutated beasts got in. After speaking, I maintained my composure. I never considered myself soft-hearted, but I also knew that there were some things a strong enough person should step up and do. I could kill, but I could also save lives. As soon as my words faded, the Type 81 in my hands roared in the pouring rain. The heavy truck barreling toward the gates suddenly slowed down, swerved, and came to a complete stop. Inghausen's subordinate ran over to check and panicked, reporting that the tires had been shot out. Before he could even curse, a scene that stunned everyone unfolded. The heavy iron gates, previously shut tight, suddenly shuddered and slowly began to open. Look, the gates. The gates are opening. At the base of the wall, a woman saw the iron gates slowly parting and screamed in excitement. Instantly, tears of joy erupted everywhere. Many scrambled and crawled, fighting to rush inside the city. The opening of Shuangwu County's iron gates undoubtedly brought the hope of survival to countless people. Even though they hadn't eaten or drank for days, their frail bodies trembling, they gritted their teeth and gave it their all, stumbling toward the gates. I frowned slightly, because right behind that crowd was a horde of zombies howling in pursuit. Previously, they had been blocked by barbed wire, abandoned cars, and armed survivors, so they hadn't closed in too fast. But now, with the crowd scattering in panic, the zombies' pursuit speed spiked. "Get off me. Let me in first. I can still work." A shirtless man suddenly kicked down a woman blocking his way. As soon as the woman fell, she was trampled by the crowd behind her. Muddy boots stomped directly on her face and stomach. She struggled to get up, but was kicked back down, her face pressed hard into the mud. One stomp, then another. Bloody foam bubbled from her mouth, her pupils slowly dilating. The man didn't even bother looking back, eagerly charging toward the gates, his face showing extreme joy as he approached the boundary of survival. But right then, a dry gunshot rang out. His head exploded, blood splattering everywhere. His body jerked backward and slammed hard into the mud. The crowd instantly froze at the sudden gunshot and the death right before their eyes. The shooter was none other than me. I had seen his actions but couldn't save the woman in time. And the one who caused her death certainly didn't deserve to live. The elderly, the weak, and children go first. Everyone else stays back, Xiang Shuehai ordered coldly. In this situation, only harsh measures could maintain order. Behind the crowd was the zombie horde. If they were allowed to push and shove chaotically, the zombies would likely catch up and flood into the city. She absolutely would not allow that to happen. The initially chaotic crowd gradually regained order. Women, the elderly, and children were led inside one by one. "Come on, little one. We don't have to die anymore." The old man and his grandson, who couldn't squeeze through earlier, finally had their chance. He hurriedly carried his grandson through the gates, going from despair to being handed back their lives in the blink of an eye. Those who still had combat ability looked at the corpse of the man on the ground and finally gritted their teeth, turning back. Gripping their weapons, they charged outward, holding off the zombie horde behind the barbed wire. Right then, the roar of engines echoed from afar. Several heavy trucks and off-road vehicles barreled straight toward the gates. "Get out of the way. Move. Don't block our savage squad." On the lead vehicle, a man with a mohawk yelled arrogantly, completely ignoring the lives of the people in front of him. The speeding truck rammed into both zombies and survivors, sending them flying over a dozen meters away, blood splattering everywhere. The thunderous noise instantly shattered the newly established order. Amidst the chaos, 2 gunshots rang out. The heavy truck suddenly exploded, its gas tank erupting violently, engulfing the entire vehicle in a sea of fire. The tires blew out one after another, thick black smoke billowing into the sky. The people inside the truck screamed miserably, but once a vehicle caught fire, there was no way out. Over a dozen members of the Savage Squad only managed a few cries before collapsing dead on the burning chassis. The explosion forced the vehicles behind to a halt. "Damn it, there's a sniper," Inghausen roared when he heard the gunshots. A gas tank couldn't just explode on its own, let alone from a random shot. Only an extremely precise shot could do that. 2 shots, and over a dozen of his men died on the spot. It was enough for him to realize the sniper was controlling the entire battlefield. Right then, Xiang Shuehai's voice rang out clearly through the wind and rain, directed straight at the Savage Squad. She declared an order for them to act as the rear guard and block the zombie horde. If they wanted to enter the city, they had to prove their worth. Otherwise, they shouldn't even dream of stepping through the gates. Inghausen's expression instantly changed. Using his Savage Squad as cannon fodder for a bunch of ordinary survivors? To him, that was no different from being pushed to his death. His squad had already suffered heavy losses. If they continued to sacrifice themselves, he would have nothing left to profit from. He didn't think he was weaker than Xiang Shuehai. She only had the upper hand because of the city walls. Ignore everything. Charge forward. Take advantage of the open gates and rush in now. Haidong, kill that hidden sniper for me. Inghausen gritted his teeth, roaring madly. It was a fight to the bitter end. If Xiang Shuehai wanted to wear down his forces, he was ready to risk it all. For someone who lived by looting and killing like him, madness had long seeped into his very bones. I was waiting for that sniper to show himself. And the moment he appeared, his position was completely locked within Ren Shiyu's mental sensory range. In the sky, the rain poured down like a waterfall, the dense drops crisscrossing and creating an endless patter. The twilight sky was terrifyingly dark, but that dim light didn't affect my vision in the slightest. I clearly saw the Savage Squad's heavy truck roaring toward the iron gates, less than 10 meters away from the crowd of survivors. "Hurry, we're almost in," Inghausen yelled from inside the Hummer H6. His eyes were bloodshot with excitement, his heart filled with relief that the truck had gotten so close to the gates without being sniped. He firmly believed Haidong had already taken care of the sniper. The other members of the Savage Squad also wore excited smiles, because in just a few more seconds, they would breach the city. In contrast, the survivors on the outer perimeter turned pale as a sheet when they saw the massive truck barreling toward them. Because just getting hit meant severe injury at best and instant death at worst. "Ing," I called out softly in my mind. No other words were needed. Ing understood my intention immediately through our mental link. I lay flat, shouting down to Luo Junjiang behind me to clear the survivors away from the gates and leave a path for the transit vehicle. The command was issued so naturally that even Luo Junjiang froze for a split second, but he quickly snapped to it and executed the order. He clearly understood that my status in Xiang Shuai's eyes was much higher than his. Right now, my words were practically her will. He absolutely didn't dare hesitate. "Everyone hold on tight," Ying's voice echoed in the cabin. Inside the vehicle, Su Shuangxin, Jiang Zhuiying, and the others were already prepared. The transit vehicle, which had been sitting idle in front of the gates, made the old expert feel uneasy. Hearing those words, a chill ran down his spine. He understood very well what this vehicle was about to do. It was no longer just a transit vehicle, it was a tank. Without needing a reminder, he quickly buckled his seatbelt tightly. With a loud boom, the base vehicle suddenly activated its acceleration mode. Fuel injected powerfully, converting into massive kinetic energy. In just a few short seconds, the vehicle reached its top speed, roaring straight toward the Savage Squad's heavy trucks. At the same time, a giant V-shaped metal bumper emerged from the front of the transit vehicle, sharp and ferocious. As the vehicle charged forward, Luo Junjiang had managed to lead his men to push the crowd to both sides, opening up a clear path. In the Savage Squad's heavy truck, the atmosphere was still filled with joy. But in the blink of an eye, the smiles on their faces froze, replaced by visible panic in their eyes. In their line of sight, a monstrous transit vehicle was charging straight out of the city gates, its V-shaped metal bumper reflecting the stormy light, looking utterly terrifying. Inghausen's eyes widened, instantly recognizing it as the same transit vehicle that had sent their truck flying like a toy earlier that day. The memory still haunted him, because despite chasing it like a madman, he had been left in the dust by its terrifying speed. "I can't brake in time," the truck driver screamed in panic. A heavy truck weighing dozens of tons needed at least 100 meters to stop once it had accelerated. He slammed on the brakes, the tires screeching horrifyingly from the friction, but the chassis kept hurtling forward. Meanwhile, the incoming transit vehicle was even faster, speeding like an F1 race car, to the point where Inghausen could almost hear the wind tearing around it. He roared that at this speed, if they collided, the other side would die first, because even with a bumper, the transit vehicle was too small compared to a heavy truck. His murderous intent flared. He wanted to see if the opponent dared to crash head-on, thinking to himself that at worst, they'd die together. A desperado like him didn't believe anyone was crazier than he was. As long as the opponent flinched, the Savage Squad would immediately breach the gates. At that exact moment, Inghausen's eyes suddenly bulged. Right before his eyes, the incoming transit vehicle continuously transformed, and in a split second, it turned into a massive mining dump truck. Compared to it, his heavy truck looked like nothing more than a toy. His scalp went numb. A sense of impending doom washed over him. He could even smell death. "Jump!" he roared madly, immediately pushing the door open and diving out. The others in the vehicle couldn't react as fast as he did. Just as Inghausen hit the ground, the mining truck slammed into the heavy truck behind him. With an earth-shattering crash, the windshield shattered, the front end caved in, and the entire chassis was thrown aside by the terrifying impact. It rolled over repeatedly, plowing straight into the zombie horde behind it. Blood poured endlessly from the gaps. The screams of those still alive inside were completely crushed by the sound of twisting metal and rolling tires. The remaining vehicles of the Savage Squad suddenly realized the mining truck had stopped and was turning around to face them. It was unclear who screamed first, but in an instant, the entire Savage Squad lost all their courage. In their eyes, whether it was a transit vehicle or a mining truck, it was a killing machine. Its speed and impact force far exceeded their trucks and off-road vehicles. What was even more terrifying was that after that collision, the front of the mining truck was practically unscathed. This was no longer a vehicle, it was a monster. Without a second thought, they scrambled out of their cars, intending to rely on their own 2 feet and the complex surrounding terrain to escape this giant machine. But if they stayed in their bulky trucks or off-road vehicles, there was absolutely no way they could outrun the mining truck. Now, without their vehicles, and with their squad suffering heavy casualties, their only path to survival was to run straight toward the city gates. Only by getting inside the city would they have a chance to live. Inghausen was also squeezing through that crowd, his hateful gaze glued to the mining truck. If he got the chance, he would blow this vehicle to pieces. Right then, an agile figure suddenly darted out from the mining truck. Ren Shiyu's voice echoed in my head, calm but sharp, he's right in front of you. The moment Inghausen jumped from the car, his mental signature had been locked onto by Shiyu. Even hiding in the crowd, he couldn't escape. To kill a snake, you must crush its head. Without me needing to give the order, Shiyu definitely wouldn't let him live. As Zero closed in, Inghausen immediately sensed an intense, life-threatening danger. From the corner of his eye, he saw a figure with cat ears weaving through the crowd, heading straight for him. You want to kill me? His remaining hand glowed red, his ability ready to activate. Anyone who dared to approach would pay the price. His ability was extremely rare and very hard to defend against. He waited for the cat-eared woman to get close, intending to burn her to death on the spot. But right then, a sharp pain pierced his head like a needle. His entire body grew dizzy, his vision blurring. No, no. A cold chill swept across his neck. A whisper seemed to echo in his ear, done. Thanks, Shiyu. Inghausen's body collapsed face first into the mud, no different from the other survivors who had fallen before him. Groups of panicked people continued to trample over his body as they ran toward the gates, no one bothering to spare him a second glance. The cat-eared girl also vanished into the crowd. Shiyu's voice echoed in my mind. Their boss is dead. Just now, she had used a mental piercing attack, coordinating with Zero to finish off Inghausen. In a situation where the enemy's full abilities were unknown, this was the safest way to avoid future trouble. The zombie horde was closing in. There was no time to hesitate. The remaining members of the Savage Squad sneaked toward the city gates. They didn't see Inghausen, nor did they know he was dead, but the most important thing right now was to survive. Suddenly, a shadow fell over them, and 2 people jumped straight down from the city wall, shotguns in hand. Bang! 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 Rapid gunshots rang out. Several Savage Squad members were blasted to pieces, collapsing into the puddles, their blood mixing with the rainwater and spreading across the ground. Motherfucker, Brother Jiang told us to keep order near the gates. How could we let these bastards slip through? Sun Kuan spat into the bloody corpses at his feet. In his eyes, the Savage Squad was just a bunch of scum who preyed on the weak, not worth a single cent of pity. Standing on the wall, seeing that my teammates had successfully blocked the Savage Squad, I nodded slightly and looked southeast, where abandoned cars were stacked into a white barricade. The Savage Squad sniper still hadn't fired a second shot. Haidong was hiding behind the barricade, his expression extremely ugly. He had realized that the sniper on the Shuangwu County wall was the same one he had clashed with earlier that day. Haidong's ability allowed him to sense the infrared radiation emitted by warm-blooded creatures. Once he locked onto my position, even without aiming directly, as long as I emitted heat, he could pinpoint me accurately. According to his calculations, hiding behind such a thin barricade was an absolute advantage. The sniper bullet's power wouldn't be reduced, and the opponent wouldn't be able to see his firing position or when he made his move. But he never expected that since our sniper appeared, not only his men, but even their vehicles were destroyed so quickly. Even Inghausen was dead. Others might not have seen it, but he saw everything. That sniper was probably the leader, along with that woman named Xiang Shuahai. Haidong immediately decided that as long as he killed these 2, he could still keep the remnants of the savage squad in Shuangwu County. He aimed his barrel through the gap, not needing to poke his head out, relying solely on infrared to lock onto my and Xiang Shuahai's positions. Right then, Shuahai, standing behind the wall, trembled slightly. She sensed a life-threatening danger, the sniper. Almost simultaneously, I raised my gun and pulled the trigger. Before Hai Dong could even fire, my bullet pierced through the thin metal barrier in front of him, hitting the target. His body was thrown backward, the gun flying from his hands, half his lung blown to pieces, his upper body soaked in blood. What is happening? Hai Dong's eyes widened in disbelief. He couldn't understand how I could shoot through the barrier, something only he was supposed to be able to do. Beside me, Shuahai was just about to pull me down when she realized the sense of danger had vanished. I said briefly, "It's fine. He's dead." From the moment I prepared to shoot, Hai Dong's position had been locked by Shiyu and transmitted to me. I only needed to aim at that exact angle. Shuahai looked at me for a moment, then turned back toward the city gates. In just a short time, the troublemaking savage squad had been mostly wiped out. The remaining survivors began to enter the gates in an orderly fashion. If it weren't for the Shering squad, who knows how many more would have died, and they wouldn't have been able to save this many people. I clearly felt the gratitude in Shuahai's eyes as Shuangwu County faced its greatest crisis. Right at that moment, an earth-shattering roar erupted from the zombie horde. That sound carried a terrifying pressure, making countless survivors tremble. I frowned. A mutated zombie. I had faced more than one before, so I knew very well the pressure they brought. The roar alone was enough to strike fear into people. Looking toward the source of the sound, I saw a bald, towering zombie amidst the dense horde. It tilted its head back and roared, its eyes blood red, its entire body pierced with steel rebars, looking from afar like an iron hedgehog. This type of zombie was extremely hard to kill. The steel rebars on its body served as both weapons and a layer of defense. More than half of its body was submerged in the water. It seemed to have been enraged by something to the point of madness. It continuously swung its arms, smashing the water. The steel rebars stabbed down, creating massive waves. With its immense weight, it used the force of pushing the water to move. Its strength was truly terrifying. In just a moment, the water's surface was dyed red with blood. A giant mutated water snake was torn to pieces, its body riddled with holes like a honeycomb, its white belly floating belly up on the water, dead in a gruesome manner. A mutated aquatic monster? So this thing finally showed up. I wasn't the only one who heard the mutated zombies roar. On the city wall, the others also immediately noticed it, witnessing the mutated zombie battling the aquatic monster with their own eyes. Xiang Shuahai had just breathed a sigh of relief when her heart instantly sank again. Right then, the pack of wild dogs suddenly barked madly. The floodwaters had surged over the area where they stood, submerging most of their bodies. Suddenly, a wild dog let out a bizarre yelp and was dragged straight under, the water splashing violently. The remaining dogs howled even more fiercely, even abandoning the corpses they were gnawing on, as if something utterly terrifying was hiding beneath the water. Howl! Another dog was pulled under. This time I saw it clearly. Beneath the pack of wild dogs, dark shadows darted through the murky water like twisting ribbons of black ink. It was a group of aquatic monsters. Even my scalp went numb at the sight. Right then, the mutated alpha dog howled madly. Its body was massive and robust, muscles bulging. It had no fur, its exposed skin as hard as steel. It opened its blood-filled mouth, but didn't roar at the water. Instead, it faced the distance. Was there something else out there? A terrible premonition rose in my heart. The pack of aquatic monsters was dangerous enough. What on earth could terrify the mutated alpha dog? The next moment, a massive wake suddenly swelled on the distant water surface, as if something was slithering beneath, heading straight for the dog pack. The wake was over a meter high. Through the murky water, a colossal silhouette could faintly be seen. The mutated alpha dog stared at it, suddenly tucked its tail, let out a yelp, and turned to flee toward the city, as if running from a nightmare. The other dogs also fled in panic, scrambling toward the city gates. It wasn't just the dogs. The mutated zombie, covered in steel rebars, also let out a low growl. The surrounding zombies froze for a few seconds, Then all simultaneously charged toward the city gates like they had gone mad. Even the mutated zombie felt fear. I stared at the wake in the water, a sense of unease spreading through my body. The entire Subei region had been submerged by the flood, the waters connecting the city to a distant lake, and no one knew what was hiding in that lake. Now, perhaps they were all following the current, seeking out this rare piece of high ground that hadn't been flooded yet, Shuangwu County. Right now, this place was like an isolated island, surrounded by water on 3 sides, and on the 4th, a horde of zombies and monsters driven here by the flood. And now, terrifying creatures had appeared in the water itself. Roar! The mutated wild dog pack and the leading mutated zombie dragged the zombie horde, surging massively toward the city gates. The survivors near the barbed wire fence couldn't hold them off at all. Some of the more timid ones, seeing the alpha dog as big as a cow charging at them with drool flying, along with the mutated zombie whose every step made the ground tremble, instantly suffered a mental breakdown. "Save me!" Screams rang out as they turned and fled, dragging others into the panic and shattering their formation. The mutated alpha dog leaped several meters into the air, crashing straight into a group of people hiding behind a car. The car was like a toy against its strength. A single swipe tore open the metal shell. The mutated zombie took massive strides forward. Its body looked almost like a normal human's, except for its lifeless, blood-red eyes and the steel rebars piercing its body. It grabbed the barbed wire fence and yanked hard. The heavily reinforced defense line was torn apart like paper. A few survivors holding guns stood trembling behind it. Between them and the monster was only a deep trench. A bullet hit a steel rebar on its body, sparking slightly, but the mutated zombie didn't stop at all. The shooter was paralyzed with fear. His scream was cut short. The last thing etched into his eyes was the mutated zombie leaping up, its giant hand grabbing him. The limp corpse was lifted into the air. The mutated zombie raised its head, looking toward the city gates. "Ing, hold them off a little longer. We can't let them breach the city." Watching the scene unfold, my heart grew heavy. I could clearly sense that the zombie horde initially charged for the survivors, but the wild dogs and these new zombies were driven here by whatever was in the water. Humans fled to Shuangwu County to survive, and those monsters were doing the exact same thing. There were still quite a few people crammed in front of the gates. Though more orderly than before, it was still chaotic, and the more chaotic it was, the slower they entered. The wild dogs were small and agile, charging much faster than the zombies. The alpha dog had already knocked down the defenders, leading a few strong dogs straight for the gates. Seeing the crowd ahead, it opened its drool-filled mouth in excitement. The survivors, realizing the dogs were right on their heels, screamed in panic, trampling each other to escape. Some of the elderly and weak were even shoved to the ground. Right then, the roar of a car engine erupted. Bang! The alpha dog and the dogs behind it were sent flying. A few died on the spot. The alpha dog was knocked back dozens of meters, the impact cracking its iron-hard skull, blood streaming down. But its defensive capabilities were so terrifying that it still didn't die, only growling in pain. The base vehicle, driven by Ing, blocked the path between the city gates and the dogs and zombies, acting as a final fortress protecting the escape route for those running into the city. "Zhang Hai, Sun Kuan, get in the car now?" Jiang Zhuiying poked her head out of the vehicle, which had just transformed back into a transit vehicle, and shouted. The situation was too dangerous. Facing the agile dogs and ferocious zombies, fighting outside was tantamount to suicide. Zhang Hai and Sun Kuan immediately jumped into the vehicle. Zero also sprinted nimbly from the pile of scrapped cars and slipped into the cabin. I stood on the city wall observing. As long as the transit vehicle held its position like a fortress, and we provided covering fire from above, there was still hope to keep the gates safe. Just then, I noticed people approaching from behind. It was Elder Chio's group. "Xiang Xuehai, why did you open the gates? Mutated beasts and giant zombies are out there. This action could get us all killed." Jiang Zhongyuan immediately interrogated her as soon as he stepped onto the wall, his eyes flashing with calculation as he glanced at me and the Shering squad. Elder Chio stood among the crowd, his expression dark, hiding his thoughts. I frowned, only one thought in my mind. What a bunch of hypocrites. Actually, I had spotted them a few minutes ago. When the Shering squad was fighting the Savage squad, Elder Chiu and his gang just stood by and watched, clearly waiting to reap the benefits. Only when the enemy was mostly dead or injured, and Inghausen had been eliminated, did they finally show up. Xiang Shuahai replied coldly, "Have you seen any monsters or zombies get into the city? With the Shering squad and me here, Shuangwu County will be safe. Jiang Zhongyuan, if you're scared, then go outside and fight. Don't forget, you people are also living off this land." Elder Chiu remained silent, just continuously rubbing the joints of his left fingers. Suddenly, he clasped his hands, let out a long breath, and swept a cold gaze over everyone. The county head and the Shering squad are indeed very strong. We should cooperate with people like that. Come on, let's move forward. As soon as he finished speaking, Yuan Hongliang laughed loudly in agreement. Let this fat Yuan open the county head's eyes. Clink, clank. The chains on his body slipped down. Yuan Hongliang swung his arm. A massive iron weight shot out like a meteor, smashing the head of a wild dog below into a bloody pulp. That power caught even my attention. Not only was the force astonishing, but the accuracy was also extremely high. Xiang Shuahai frowned slightly, clearly noticing it too. Yuan Hongliang swung the chain again, and the iron weight whistled through the air, flying back to him. Right then, I caught a glimpse of the corner of Elder Chiu's mouth curling into a cold smirk, a smile that made a sense of abnormality rise in my heart. I glanced at the captains of the other survivor groups, like Shorty Chin, and immediately realized they were also staring intently at me. At that moment, Ren Shiyu's urgent voice rang in my head. "Brother Jiang, be careful. They have murderous intent." Shiyu was currently in the base vehicle below, only a few dozen meters away, so she could clearly sense the emotions of Elder Chiu's group. Her warnings had given me the upper hand many times, even saving my life once. So I didn't hesitate at all. I immediately sprang up, raised my gun, and pulled the trigger. With my reaction speed, by the time Shorty Chin's group realized what was happening, they were already staring down the dark barrel of my gun. The whole group turned pale with fear. Bang! A gunshot rang out, a thin wisp of blue smoke puffing from the muzzle. Among the stunned captains, a figure trembled and collapsed. It was Elder Chiu. Clutching his chest, blood seeping through his fingers, he lay on the ground groaning, angrily pointing at me and screaming, "Kill them." He's still not dead? I was slightly startled. At such close range, the Type 81 should have taken his life. The next moment, I saw stark white bone spikes growing out of Elder Chiu's limbs and ribs, especially around his chest, which was densely covered in sharp spikes, some of which were cracked and broken by my bullet. Bone manipulation ability. It was these spikes that had reduced the bullet's power, but even so, he was heavily injured. Before I could think further, out of the corner of my eye, I saw an iron weight flying straight at me. I immediately grabbed Xiang Shuahai's shoulder, pulling her back, while simultaneously calling out to Ing in my mind. The moment the thought was transmitted, the transit vehicle immediately turned around. Shuahai was the slowest to react. She hadn't expected me to shoot Elder Chiu. Facing over a dozen mutants, this action was extremely dangerous, but she still trusted me instinctively. Boom! Rubble flew everywhere. The spot where she had just been standing was smashed into a deep crater by the iron weight. If she had been half a beat slower, she would have lost her life. Yuan Hongliang roared, swinging the iron weight to create strong gusts of wind, continuing to charge at us. On the narrow city wall, Shuahai and I quickly retreated. Stone slabs were smashed into deep pits one after another, a truly terrifying sight. But no matter how strong the iron weight was, it couldn't compare to the speed of a bullet. In my eyes, with my superior neural reflexes, its trajectory slowed down significantly, giving me enough time to dodge. Shuahai was accelerated by the wind, so she wasn't threatened either. Right then, a sharp whistling sound came from afar. I looked up and saw that Jiang Zhongyuan had activated his bloodline ability, transforming into a giant grizzly bear. At the same time, Shorty Chin curled up in midair, turning into a round ball, revealing two hands holding alloy blades. His body emitted a faint golden light, his skin as hard as metal, and he was wearing a bulletproof vest on the outside. He intended to coordinate with the iron weight to kill us. the ones with the most threatening firearms. But before he could close in, a strong gust of wind suddenly erupted beneath his feet, revealing countless sharp wind blades within. Clang, clang. The sound of metal clashing rang out continuously against Shorty Chin's body. He snorted disdainfully, thinking these wind blades couldn't do anything to him. But just as he prepared to strike, I gave a cold smirk. Another strong gust of wind swept him off course, causing his attack to hit empty air. I spoke quickly to Shuahai. The next moment, I grabbed her, and together we leaped backward off the city wall. At the base of the wall, the transit vehicle was already waiting, a bizarre black tube protruding from its front. Just as the 7 or 8 mutants rushed to the spot we had just vacated, that black tube let out a horrifying screech. A chill ran down Shorty Chin's spine, his heart clenching. Only one thought flashed through his mind. I'm dead. The air cannon tore through the air, its terrifying power sweeping away everything in front of it. A whole section of the city wall, along with the mutants standing on it, was blown into a rain of blood and flesh. Only Yuan Hongliang's iron weight fell heavily to the ground with a thud. I watched from midair, my eyes still calm. That shot had practically wiped out the strongest captains on the wall. Elder Chiu was also heavily injured. The rest were no longer a threat. This was a fatal blow I had calculated in advance, from pulling Shuahai back to coordinating with Ing to adjust the firing angle. Step by step, I lured the enemy into a trap while ensuring the guards weren't harmed. The screech of the air cannon sounded like the roar of a beast, terrifying everyone. Broken wall fragments rained down, survivors fled in panic, and even the wild dogs and zombies were stunned into pausing by the shockwave. Looking at the massive hole in the city wall, Elder Chiu's face twitched, his anger replaced by fear. He roared hoarsely, "Close the gates. Close the gates now." He finally understood. He absolutely could not let that terrifying transit vehicle and me enter the city, or else they would all die. Even though his bone ability had saved his life by covering his chest in metal hard bone spikes. He was now heavily injured, his combat strength reduced to less than half, and he had no courage left to face me and Xiang Shuahai. Since the apocalypse began, this was the first time I had seen Elder Chiu panic like this. Before, he was just a bone cancer patient, bedridden and waiting to die. But when the apocalypse hit, the virus mutated his bone cells. Not only did he survive, but he gained a vitality stronger than a young man's. Holding power and abilities, Elder Chiu absolutely did not want to die. Jiang Zhongyuan, what are you standing there for? Close the gates. Elder Chiu was furious, clearly not expecting Jiang Zhongyuan to react so slowly in a crisis. Hearing the shout, Jiang Zhongyuan rolled his eyes and finally snapped out of it. He had truly been terrified just now. The terrifying power of the transit vehicle sent chills down his spine. That freakish vehicle was simply not something humans could deal with. Elder Chiu, we can't beat them, Jiang Zhongyuan suddenly blurted out. What did you say? Elder Chiu's face turned red as he coughed violently. We're surrounded by water on all sides. Do we even have a way out? After being heavily injured and losing too much blood, he looked much older and weaker, curled up on the ground coughing violently, no different from an ordinary old survivor. At that exact moment, Jiang Zhongyuan suddenly realized that Elder Chiu was no longer terrifying. A vicious glint flashed in his eyes. He stepped forward, his fan-like hand swiping down. With his bloodline ability, he had the strength of a bear and the agility of a monkey. When he lunged, the two mutants beside Elder Chiu didn't even have time to react. You. Elder Chiu only managed to utter 2 words before a series of cracks rang out. The bone spikes on his head were snapped off. His head slumped to the side, eyes bulging, mouth agape, blood pouring out endlessly. County head, Elder Chiu is dead. We don't want to fight anymore. He orchestrated all of this, and now we've killed him. Jiang Zhongyuan shouted into the storm, holding Elder Chiu's corpse high. At the base of the wall, Xiang Shuahai and I had returned to the vehicle after the air cannon fired, witnessing the scene with our own eyes. Shuahai breathed a sigh of relief, her eyes lighting up. A two-faced snake like Jiang Zhongyuan had actually done us a huge favor. With Elder Chiu dead, the survivor groups in the city would quickly surrender. As long as the inside was stable, we only had to deal with the monsters outside. The wild dogs and zombies had snapped out of it after the massive explosion. The mutated alpha dog and the mutated zombie roared simultaneously. These mutated monsters already possessed a certain level of intelligence. Though they lacked human emotions, the alpha dog carried a terrifying, instinctual cunning. They understood very well that to breach the city, they had to deal with the transit vehicle blocking their path. The mutated zombie stepped forward, roared, and lifted an abandoned car, throwing it with all its might straight at the transit vehicle. Ing immediately drove the vehicle forward a few meters to dodge. Right then, the system's warning rang in my head. Warning. Base vehicle damaged. Left airbag punctured. Damage level, 10%. I froze. Since its upgrade, the base vehicle had been practically invulnerable and had never been damaged. Where did this warning come from? No one around the vehicle had sounded an alarm. Zhang Hai and Sun Kuan were still guarding both sides. Immediately, I received a panoramic view shared by Ying. Under the chassis, the mutated alpha dog was sprinting rapidly, its body completely hidden by the vehicle. In the moment the vehicle dodged, it had bitten and clawed, its sharp teeth piercing the bulletproof tire in a single strike, causing the airbag to burst, then nimbly circling to the back to look for another chance to attack. This dog was too cunning. The thrown car was clearly just a distraction, while it was the real deadly strike. Ram it, I ordered in my mind. The transit vehicle immediately slammed on the brakes, steered hard, and executed a clean drift, spinning a full 90 degrees in just 1 second. The mutated dog couldn't dodge in time and was sent flying dozens of meters by the impact. The machine gun instantly roared to life. The dog was riddled with bullets in midair, blood and bone spraying. It hit the ground howling miserably, then staggered to its feet, relying solely on its terrifying vitality to stay up. I stood in the control room, gripping the machine gun, my eyes locked onto the target. The dog tried to flee, but the transit vehicle roared toward it, its sharp front end gleaming with a metallic coldness. The mutated zombie roared, lifting another car and throwing it straight at us, trying to block the ram. I didn't waver. This mutated wild dog was too hard to deal with. If I didn't kill it now, it would come back to attack. These monsters would keep fighting as long as they drew breath. Facing the incoming thrown car, the transit vehicle didn't dodge, charging straight ahead. Crash. The right bulletproof window cracked like a spiderweb, but the speed didn't drop at all. Warning. Base vehicle sustained level 1 damage. Right bulletproof window durability decreased by 10%. I completely ignored it. With the current upgrades, this crack wasn't worth worrying about. Boom. A heavy crash echoed as the front of the transit vehicle slammed directly into the mutated alpha dog's head, shattering its skull and sending the monster flying hundreds of meters before it smashed hard into the city wall. This time, the mutated wild dog had completely become a cold corpse. The moment it fell, a group of people immediately rushed out of the city gates, including Jiang Zhongyuan and Luo Junjiang. Several mutants quickly hoisted the mutated wild dog's corpse up. The others held guns, firing continuously at the wild dogs and zombies still trying to charge in. Gunshots rang out rapidly, each bullet piercing straight into their heads. These people were originally Elder Chio's elite subordinates, their combat abilities even stronger than many members of the defense squad. Any wild dog or zombie that dared to cross the barbed wire fence was shot down instantly. Captain Jiang, don't worry. I'll help you collect the spoils of war. Jiang Zhongyuan shouted loudly to show his loyalty, but I only half listened and ignored him. With the mutated alpha dog dead, the pack of wild dogs instantly scattered like a gang of thugs losing their boss. Some still tried to charge the gates, while others panicked and tried to find a way around to other parts of Shuangwu County. Without coordination and a mutated beast to lead them, the wild dogs were no longer a major threat. The floodwaters were still slowly rising. Ing steered the vehicle around, the tires already submerged deep in the water, then aimed straight at the mutated zombie. The monster took 2 steps back as if wanting to retreat, but behind it was the floodwater, and the transit vehicle's approach had completely enraged it. The mutated zombie roared, this time charging straight at the vehicle with its bare hands. It moved like a tank plowing through knee-deep water, every step kicking up massive columns of water. When it was about 10 meters away from the vehicle, it suddenly leaped high into the air, reaching a height of 7 or 8 meters. The steel rebars embedded in its arms gleamed as it plummeted straight down, clearly intending to smash the transit vehicle to pieces. Right then, Rin Shiyu's urgent scream rang out in the vehicle, "Brother Jiang, there's an incredibly strong mental signature approaching from underwater. It's extremely dangerous." I was startled, my expression changing instantly. "Fall back." The transit vehicle, which was preparing to attack, immediately threw it in reverse at terrifying speed. Its reverse speed was no less than its forward charge, and in the blink of an eye, it had retreated close to the city gates. The mutated zombie missed, its punch slamming hard into the murky water. But the moment it landed, it suddenly sensed a terrifying danger. Behind it, a massive wave was swelling up. Amidst the churning water, a colossal dark shadow surfaced, inflating like a balloon, finally revealing its full form to everyone. It was a monster that looked like a cross between a fish and an octopus, possessing 8 giant tentacles. Its entire body was covered in thick, metallic scales, each as big as a wash basin. Just at a glance, it was over 10 meters tall and about 30 meters long, almost covering the entire water surface outside the city walls. One of its slimy tentacles wrapped tightly around the mutated zombie covered in steel rebars. That body, previously considered to have skin of bronze and bones of iron, actually let out horrifying cracking sounds as it was squeezed. The zombie roared, struggling madly, but the more it struggled, the tighter the tentacle squeezed. Its strength quickly drained, its eyes rolling back. The tentacle dug deep into its body, clearly secreting toxins, leaving the monster with no way to escape. Finally, blood sprayed out in streams. The mutated zombie went limp, then was swallowed whole in the blink of an eye by the giant monster's cave-like, tooth-filled mouth. Witnessing this scene from inside the base vehicle, a chill ran down my spine. This aquatic monster was the very thing that had terrified both the mutated wild dogs and the mutated zombie. Everyone had seen the mutated zombie's strength, but in front of this thing, it had absolutely no power to resist. Inside the cabin, everyone fell silent, shocked by the sight before them. Immediately after, a series of heavy splashes echoed from underwater. Water sprayed everywhere as giant snake-like or fish-like monsters surfaced one after another, swallowing the zombies whole. The wild dogs suffered an even worse fate. The moment they were caught, they were torn to pieces, turning into pools of blood. Get into the city now? I immediately snapped back to reality, because I knew very well that these monsters were extremely dangerous. Even the base vehicle couldn't face them head-on. Even though the vehicle was powerful, if it got wrapped up by a tentacle and dragged underwater, we would lose almost all our advantages, not to mention the air cannon would be useless. The outside of the city walls was no longer a place we could stay. Thanks to the Shur-ing squad and the transit vehicle blocking the wild dogs and the mutated zombie, the survivors outside Shuangwu County quickly flooded into the city. As they stepped through the gates, everyone felt like they had just narrowly escaped death, even though it was still incredibly dangerous outside. At least for now, they were temporarily safe. An old man leading his young grandson turned back to look at the transit vehicle outside the gates as soon as he entered, muttering endless thanks. He didn't care about his own life. He only hoped his young grandson could survive, and that vehicle had pulled him out of the abyss of despair. The floodwaters had risen close to the barbed wire fence, but temporarily stopped rising. Shuangwu County's terrain, especially the northern part, was higher, with mountains backing the town. So at least in the short term, there was no worry of the entire county being submerged, even though the vast expanse of water outside the gates still sent chills down everyone's spines. The transit vehicle tore through the water, charging straight into the fortified city gates. Jiang Zhongyuan and a group of people from the survivor squads stood guard there. Everyone had seen the giant monster outside and turned pale with fear, but they still didn't dare leave their posts before the Shur-ing squad retreated inside. "Close the gates." My voice rang out from inside the vehicle. Jiang Zhongyuan and the others felt like they had been granted amnesty, immediately shutting the heavy iron gates tight. I turned to look at Xiang Shuahai behind me, saying in a deep voice, "Tell everyone to keep moving to higher ground. We won't be able to hold these gates." "We can't hold the gates?" Xiang Shuahai was stunned. In the apocalypse, when zombies and mutated beasts ran rampant, occupying and building a stable base was already incredibly difficult. Since the day she gradually took control of Shuangwu County, she had poured a lot of effort into building the defense system, from the walls to the gates, consuming countless materials and manpower. To her, the city gates weren't just a crucial defensive line protecting Shuangwu County. They were the place that provided the greatest sense of security. Hearing me say we couldn't hold them anymore, her heart ached, but her reason told her my judgment was correct. Not just because of the giant aquatic monster inflating out there, but also because the floodwaters were still rising. Once soaked through, the foundation of the city walls would erode and eventually collapse over time. When that happened, the zombies floating on the water and the monsters beneath it would easily flood in. She looked out of the vehicle. Right against the city walls were makeshift tents where emaciated survivors were huddled to escape the rain. Hundreds of tents were crammed together, housing countless ordinary civilians. Outsiders like Elder Chiu hadn't cared about their fate at all, nor had they organized any evacuation. Thinking of the consequences, Xiang Shuahai couldn't help but shudder. She immediately got out of the vehicle, sternly instructing Luo Junjiang to quickly send people to notify everyone to move to higher ground, making it clear that the wall area would be extremely dangerous. Shuangwu County was backed by a mountain. The area at the base of the wall was already flooded up to the ankles. To Luo Junjiang, her words were an absolute command. He immediately led the defense squad to evacuate the survivors in the tents. Right then, an earth-shattering explosion suddenly rang out. The entire city wall shook violently, rubble flying everywhere. The city gates looked as if they had been smashed by a giant hammer. A long, black tentacle, 8 or 9 meters long, whipped straight into the iron gates, severely denting a large section. The doors rattled violently, looking like they were about to collapse. The terrifying noise made the survivors who had just escaped death instantly turn pale. A long, bizarre screech echoed from outside. From high above, the giant aquatic monster that looked like a balloon appeared. Its head loomed at a height of over 20 meters, supported by its 8 long tentacles. Its cold, triangular eyes glowed terrifyingly, staring straight inside the city walls. Locked onto by that gaze, all of Shuangwu County fell into a panic. Even I, inside the base vehicle, felt a heavy pressure bearing down. There were still a few guards on the wall who hadn't retreated in time. Just as they turned to run, a slimy tongue covered in sharp spikes shot out from the monster's mouth. The tongue swept across the wall with a horrifying hiss, wrapping tightly around the guards one by one. They screamed, fighting back desperately, but covered in the slime, they quickly stiffened and fell silent. Without needing anyone to yell further, the remaining survivors understood what they had to do, immediately scrambling toward the higher areas of the county. The base vehicle started up, blending into the retreating crowd. With my superior vision, I went up to the combat room on the roof and clearly saw the monster's tongue dripping with toxic slime. The guards who came into contact with it were instantly paralyzed, completely losing their ability to resist. Even the mutated zombie from earlier had been weakened by the venom-coated tentacle until it was immobilized. At this moment, Su Shuangxin stood at the back of the vehicle, holding onto the door frame. Staring intently at the monster, he said in a deep voice, "It looks like a mutated pufferfish." Li Yusin, standing beside him, nodded in confirmation. White belly, a body that can inflate like a balloon, short snout, small mouth. They all closely resemble a pufferfish. Su Shuangxin had studied hydrology in Subei, and Li Yusin was a medical student. They both knew that pufferfish toxin was an extremely potent neurotoxin, thousands of times stronger than cyanide. In its mutated state, this toxicity could only be even more terrifying. I frowned. This aquatic monster was far more dangerous than ordinary mutated creatures. We had to deal with its toxic slime first. After swallowing a few guards, the mutated pufferfish still wasn't satisfied. Its 8 tentacles continuously whipped against the city gates. Although the iron gates hadn't broken yet, the connection points to the wall had begun to loosen. Women holding babies, the elderly leaning on canes. Almost all the survivors in the county were frantically fleeing to higher ground. Half an hour later, many people had reached the mountainside. Shuangwu County's terrain was relatively flat. The mountainside was only a dozen meters higher than the base of the wall, but from there on up, it became much steeper. Many people were exhausted, collapsing onto the wet ground. Right then, an earth-shattering sound of collapse echoed from the foot of the mountain. I turned to look and saw that the city gates had completely caved in, dragging down 2 long sections of the wall with them. The massive body of the mutated pufferfish was fully revealed, its white belly heaving. With only a portion of its body submerged in the water, its entire form was supported by its tentacles, looking like a swollen balloon. Its tentacles swept across the embankment, sending the makeshift tents flying like wood chips. Many survivors who had been in those tents trembled in fear. If they had left even a moment later, they would have ended up like that pile of debris. Amidst the crowd, the sound of children sobbing rang out, followed by one desperate remark after another. Worries about the food left behind, about starving to death, about the impossibility of fighting the aquatic monster. I heard it all, my heart heavy, because I knew the greatest danger still lay ahead. The cries of children, the sighs of adults, and the anxious whispers spread through the crowd of survivors, causing their morale to waver. Previously, many people had fled to Shuangwu County because it had good order, a rare haven of peace amidst the chaos of Subei. But now, that peaceful land seemed to be turning into a living hell. Despair gradually spread through everyone's eyes. "Don't be afraid. That monster can't come ashore." A clear voice rang out from above the crowd. Xiang Shuahai stood on the roof of a 3-story building near the base, on the mountainside, where she had a wide vantage point, so almost everyone could see her. Amplified by her ability, her voice carried on the wind, ringing clearly through the storm, completely drowning out the crying and chatter. Hearing this, the crowd turned to look toward the city gates, where the mutated pufferfish was. Sure enough, the giant monster hadn't crawled ashore. Its long tentacles only swept pointlessly through a few tents. Its cold, triangular eyes stared intently at the survivors crammed on the mountainside, letting out bizarre squeaks. Even though it had mutated, it still couldn't escape its fish instincts. It couldn't leave the water to come ashore. Realizing this, the survivors finally breathed a temporary sigh of relief. Xiang Shuahai continued to speak, her voice calm but resolute, stating her name and reassuring everyone. She said that they were facing a flood disaster but must not panic. They had to stand strong together. She asked everyone to gather all usable items like food, pots, blankets, and clothes, then temporarily set up camp on the mountainside. She declared that as long as she was here, Shuangwu County would not be invaded by zombies or aquatic monsters, and this place would be turned into an impregnable fortress. Her words weren't flowery, but they were full of sincerity and determination, enough to ignite faith in the hearts of the crowd. The panic gradually subsided. Many people's eyes lit up again as they looked at Xiang Shuahai standing in the wind and rain, like a symbol of hope amidst the gloomy scenery. The old hydrology expert, Su Shuangxin, sighed in praise, saying that Xiang Shuahai was truly a good person. She was far kinder than Yang Feng, because if it were him, he definitely wouldn't care about the lives of these ordinary civilians. Everyone in the vehicle agreed, but immediately after, old Su heavily pointed out another truth. The Fuyang River levee has broken, and the Lu and Yin rivers are about to break too. The floodwaters will keep rising. Even though they were temporarily sheltering on high ground, if the flood didn't recede and they had no food, they would starve to death sooner or later, because the cruelty of nature was something humans couldn't fight against. He looked up at the pitch-black, rainy sky, sighing that it was nature itself pushing humanity to a dead end. The vehicle fell silent. I listened to those words, my heart heavy, because with Su Shuangxin's experience, this possibility was highly credible. If the floodwaters continued to rise, that aquatic monster could absolutely close in on the mountainside where everyone was sheltering. Staying in Shuangwu County was becoming extremely dangerous, not to mention Xiang Shuahai's food warehouses were all near the city gates, which were now inaccessible. They had evacuated too hastily, bringing almost no preparations. And if the flood lasted, even if the water eventually receded, many people would die of starvation or disease. In that moment, the thought of leaving Shuangwu County crossed my mind, because the north hadn't been flooded yet and might be safer. Now that the mutated pufferfish had its eyes on this place, it definitely wouldn't leave. Staying would only put the whole group in increasing danger. Su Shuangxin sighed helplessly, saying that if it weren't for that underwater monster, there might still be a way, but with it here, everything was a dead end. Right then, Rin Shiyu's voice rang out from the back of the vehicle. She said Jiang Zhongyuan's mental state was fluctuating wildly. He seemed to be threatening his accomplices and planning to escape. I turned back and saw that Shiyu was already exhausted. From the battle with Elder Qiu in the building until our retreat halfway up the mountain, she hadn't stopped using her mental detection ability once. The toll on her was immense, especially after the previous battle with Yang Feng. Even with Li Yusin helping her recover somewhat, she still desperately needed rest. I told Shiyu to stop worrying about Jiang Zhongyuan and take a break so Yusin could help her recover. She gave a slight nod. She knew she had to conserve her strength, sensing that the moment we'd need her most was still ahead. As Shiyu closed her eyes to rest, I looked over at Jiang Zhongyuan, who was hiding in the crowd. He was glaring and shouting at 5 or 6 other ability users, seemingly trying to drag them into fleeing with him, but they looked hesitant. Watching this, I sneered inwardly. Ever since we were in the building, I hadn't trusted Jiang Zhongyuan, even after he killed Elder Qiu and groveled for his life. In our current situation, every ability user was crucial. His attempt to take people and run was absolutely unacceptable. Just as I raised my Type 81 rifle to aim at him, things took a sudden turn. 2 ability users behind Jiang Zhongyuan suddenly struck. One threw a full-force punch right at his head, while the other swung a blade, slashing his legs to pieces. Caught completely off guard, Jiang Zhongyuan couldn't react. Blood sprayed everywhere as the other 4 ability users instantly joined the attack. In just a few short seconds, Jiang Zhongyuan was torn apart, dying on the spot. Immediately after, one of the ability users in the group hurriedly ran toward the 3-story building where Xiang Shuahai was standing, clearly intending to surrender to save his own life. I couldn't help but chuckle to myself at the sight. Not long ago, Jiang Zhongyuan betrayed Elder Qiu in exchange for his life, and now, the very people standing beside him had repeated the exact same thing, betraying and killing him to save themselves. Those ability users had no intention of running away, so there was no need for me to intervene. Organizing and dealing with them was Xiang Shuahai's responsibility. I turned my head toward the city gate. The water monster had returned to the surface, with only half of its body floating on the murky water. Level 2+ mutant energy detected. The starseed's voice echoed in my mind. It was a level 2 mutant pufferfish. The starseed had mentioned it earlier, but the battle had been too intense for me to pay attention. The plus sign after its level meant it was on the verge of breaking through to level 3. If it fully digested the corpses of the mutant zombie and the wild dogs, and then continued to feed on the survivors in Shuangwu County, it was highly likely it would evolve into a level 3 mutant monster. Level 3. Up until now, I had never directly faced a monster of that caliber. A few hours later. Crash. The minibus, equipped with a massive V-shaped ram, smashed straight into an abandoned house near the foot of the mountain, bringing the entire structure down in the blink of an eye. The young survivors behind the minibus immediately rushed forward, using their hands and shoulders to carry away bricks and steel-reinforced concrete. Despite the pouring rain, they pushed through, transporting the materials to the flood dike under construction. This dike was being built to stop the rising floodwaters and to create an additional line of defense against the water monster's attacks. But there weren't enough sandbags, forcing them to use all sorts of other building materials, especially bricks and rubble. Due to the shortage, the survivors of Shuangwu County had to demolish abandoned houses in the danger zone to scavenge for construction materials. My minibus, with its massive ram, naturally became a makeshift demolition vehicle. The dike was built about 5 or 6 meters from the halfway point of the mountain, keeping a fair distance from the city wall. Xiang Shuahai and I had calculated it carefully, determining that this distance was safe enough to avoid easy ambushes from the water monsters. Of course, this was all based on the premise that Ren Shiyu had confirmed the mutant pufferfish had temporarily left the area. Right now, everyone was racing against the clock to set up defenses. With days of endless rain and a severe lack of food, many survivors were carrying materials in a state of utter exhaustion, their backs hunched as they trudged through the muddy ground. An elderly man slipped and fell into the mud, the concrete block on his shoulder nearly crushing his leg. Just then, a gentle breeze swept past, and the concrete block suddenly shifted direction, sliding to the side. Immediately after, a pale but incredibly strong hand reached out, pulling him up from the mud. "Sir, are you all right?" The man looked up. The person helping him was none other than Xiang Shuahai. Her long black hair was tied up high, and her hands were covered in mud. She just gave him a slight nod before continuing to check on the construction progress. The man was deeply moved. An ability user, the leader of Shuangwu County, actually cared about an ordinary survivor like him. "Sir, don't carry anything too heavy. Just take the light stuff. We'll handle the rest." A young man nearby called out, helping him carry the concrete block away. "All right," the man said, looking at the young faces before him. Since the apocalypse began, it had been a long time since he'd witnessed such a scene. Those simple words of care had now become incredibly precious. In the midst of crisis, he felt a rare trace of warmth. Gritting his teeth, he turned back toward the pile of materials, thinking that as long as he had strength, he would help however he could. Chief Xiang really is a good person. Zhang Hai couldn't help but sigh as he watched the scene. I remained silent. Now, the entirety of Shuangwu County had been mobilized. Every survivor was giving their all to build the flood dike. Everywhere I went, I saw groups of people diligently carrying materials. Whenever someone was too exhausted, others would immediately bring them hot water and porridge, all arranged by Xiang Shuahai. No one slacked off. Everyone helped and encouraged one another. A strange sense of upliftment spread through everyone's hearts. Even while working in the freezing rain, exhausted to the bone, their spirits were incredibly high. I also personally joined in building the dike. Zhang Hai and Sun Kuan took the initiative to get out of the vehicle and work, while I went around helping wherever I could. Not only the city guards, but even the ordinary survivors knew I was a terrifying sharpshooter, the captain of a survivor squad that owned a monstrous steel vehicle. When they saw me, some thanked me profusely, while others showed obvious fear and apprehension. "Take a break." Zero prepared some roast meat in the vehicle. I brought it down for everyone. Jiang Jing walked over lightly, followed by the elderly hydrology expert, Sun Shuangxin. In his hands was a tray of marinated mutant beast meat. In such harsh conditions, the smell of roast meat was all the more enticing. "You're bringing food, but you made a senior hydrology expert tag along to help?" I asked helplessly. "No, I could carry it myself. Mr. Sun just wanted to help," Jiang Zhuiying said, raising her bandaged hands. "It has nothing to do with the little girl. I volunteered to help," Sun Shuangxin said with a smile. This old man should do some work too. In truth, he had seen how busy Xiang Shuahai and I were in Shuangwu County. He had secretly gone out to help before, but due to his old age and frail body, he was nearly exhausted after carrying just one sandbag in the rain, ultimately not being of much help. Even so, he still wanted to contribute what little strength he had. The current atmosphere in Shuangwu County was exactly the kind of survivor base he had always envisioned. Though there had been conflicts and struggles, when disaster struck, everyone united as one. He also hoped Shuangwu County could overcome this disaster. "Mr. Sun, did you need me for something?" I always maintained my respect for this hydrology expert. If it weren't for his timely warning about the flash flood, escaping that terrifying deluge would have been incredibly dangerous, even with the base vehicle. "Since the temporary dike is finished, I probably shouldn't say this," Sun Shuangxin sighed. "But as long as the Fuyang River dike remains unreinforced for even a day, the floodwaters won't recede. And with monsters in the water, the situation is extremely dangerous." Hearing his words, my expression turned serious. If the floodwaters didn't recede, Shuangwu County would remain in peril, and if my squad left, there would be no path to Panju City. In fact, no one even knew if Panju City had been affected by this flood. Sun Shuangxin looked at the bustling survivors, his eyes red. For humanity, surviving is truly not easy. "Captain Jiang, I'm old. You all saved me, but now I just want to stay in Shuangwu County. I was born here, I grew up here, and my family is all gone. I want to die here and reunite with them." I looked at him quietly, then shifted my gaze to the people still hard at work. "Mr. Sun, is there really no way to deal with the flood?" I asked. "There are methods, yes, But how can we implement them while that water monster is still out there? He sighed again. That mutant pufferfish, it killed even a mutant zombie in the blink of an eye. And since it operates underwater, there's almost no way to deal with it. A thought suddenly flashed through my mind. From Mr. Sun's tone, I understood he had a plan to resolve the flood. The only major obstacle was that water monster. What if that monster dies? Could you reduce the flooding then? I asked directly. How could anyone kill it? Captain Jiang, don't do anything foolish. Mr. Sun panicked, seeing my serious expression, and hurriedly tried to stop me. I just gave a faint smile. I fully understood how terrifying that monster was, but since I asked, I obviously wasn't just talking big. Killing it would be extremely dangerous, but it wasn't impossible. The key requirement was a boat, and it had to be a boat strong enough for combat. Right now, I had a special level 2 mutant core in my possession. If I integrated this core into the base vehicle, I could unlock a new form, an amphibious mode. But to activate that mode, the base vehicle needed to scan a ship to simulate its functions, evolving into a new type of vehicle. The simulation and evolution process didn't require any other materials. Just having the ship was enough. Of course, the stronger the ship, the stronger the simulated base vehicle would be. The only condition was that the scanned ship couldn't have a standard displacement exceeding 400 tons, and its maximum displacement couldn't exceed 500 tons. In other words, only small vessels could be used. Larger ships, like offshore destroyers, were completely unusable because doing so would require the base vehicle to evolve to an extremely high level. Right now, my base vehicle hadn't even activated the energy laboratory. Therefore, I just needed to find a ship that was strong enough and met the conditions. I believed that my base vehicle, in its amphibious mode, would be more than capable of destroying that mutant pufferfish. Mr. Sun, you just need to answer my question, I said. Mr. Sun pushed up his glasses and sighed. Captain Jiang, if that monster really dies, there won't be anything hindering underwater operations anymore. I have a few plans that could lower the floodwaters. Hearing that, I felt more at ease. In that case, there was only one thing left to do. Kill that water monster. Mr. Sun, then don't worry about it anymore. I want to ask, is there a shipyard nearby? I need a small ship, but its firepower has to be strong enough. You need a ship to kill the water monster? Captain Jiang, that's no different from suicide. Mr. Sun shook his head repeatedly, clearly not wanting me, the person who had saved his life, to walk into a death trap. Saying that means you know of a ship like that, right? My eyes lit up. Yes, I do. He lowered his voice. There used to be a shipbuilding expert in Yangfeng's military base, but he passed away. Before he died, he told me that the military shipyard once received an order to build a type of vessel called the Type 022 stealth missile boat. This boat is small but packs heavy firepower, and it has certain stealth capabilities. It might perfectly fit your requirements. Even though he didn't believe I could pull it off, let alone kill the water monster, he still told me because I asked. A Type 022 stealth missile boat. My heart skipped a beat. According to Mr. Sun, this ship was an absolutely perfect fit. Mr. Sun, do you know exactly where that military shipyard is? He thought for a moment before recalling the location. It's located downstream on a river, between Shuangwu County and Qingshi County to the north. The location is very concealed, and the water is deep. Building a military shipyard there was indeed a logical choice. Right after, I received a message from Zero, saying that the base vehicle was being loaded with crates of food and fuel. Luo Junjiang was also directing the city guards to continuously unload goods from a medium-sized truck. I immediately understood. Xiang Shuahai had kept her word and sent over the payment for hiring my squad. Just then, Xiang Shuahai walked over. Captain Jiang, you're just in time. I've sent over everything you requested. It's just that, right now, I can't find any water transport. There are only a few old boats, and I'm afraid they're unusable, she said apologetically. I smiled and shook my head. There's no need. The floodwaters are rising, and the water is full of monsters. Taking a normal boat out would just be a death sentence. I'm very grateful that Chief Xiang kept her word even in such scarce conditions. Xiang Shuahai was truly a woman of principle, which earned my genuine respect. Captain Jiang. She hesitated for a moment before asking. The floodwaters around Shuangwu County are still rising. I'm afraid we'll have to endure many more difficult days. Do you have any plans? Now that Elder Chio is dead, our cooperative relationship is essentially over. Her voice slowed down. Actually, I'm guessing you might be leaving. She assumed I would leave Shuangwu County. My original purpose for coming here was just to gather information and find someone, and attacking Yangfeng's base was solely for that goal. Now that I had the information I needed and had fulfilled her request to eliminate Elder Chio and his faction, there was truly no reason to stay in this danger-filled place any longer. For others, leaving Shuangwu County meant facing hordes of zombies and mutant monsters everywhere, but she believed those dangers wouldn't pose a problem for me. She waited quietly for an answer, a sense of reluctance lingering in her heart. Her gaze was deep as she looked at me, reflecting unpredictable secrets. The memory of that kiss on the minibus suddenly surfaced, making her hastily regain her composure, but a quiet sadness still spread within her. She didn't have the courage to open her mouth and ask me to stay, not just for now, but for the future. Captain Jiang. She bit her lip lightly and spoke slowly. To me, Shuangwu County is my home in this apocalypse. The survivors here trust me. They risked their lives to come here seeking safety. I can't abandon them. If we survive this disaster, and if there's a chance in the future, I'd be more than happy to welcome you back. A cooperative relationship sounds so distant. You saved my life. Can we consider each other friends? She gave a soft smile, her eyes brightening, but there were still things left unsaid in her heart. She didn't know if she should blurt out that she wanted me to stay, not just for now, but forever. I looked at Xiang Shuahai, noticing her hands were slightly red, as if she still had so much left unsaid. My future plans? I replied slowly. Actually, I have a little plan. I want to find a ship. She was surprised and subconsciously asked, and then? I said calmly, and then, I'm going to kill the water monster. You want to kill that mutant pufferfish? Xiang Shuehai's lips parted slightly, so shocked she couldn't close them for a moment, even doubting if she had misheard. As an ability user, she naturally understood just how powerful that underwater monster was. It was something that could crush even a mutant zombie. Faced with such an existence, even Yang Feng would have no choice but to run. Yet here I was, saying I would deal with it, and saying it so casually. She could feel the confidence in my voice, but she still couldn't comprehend it. The northern part of Shuangwu County still had higher ground. I could absolutely leave safely. So why would I choose this dangerous path? It was a decision completely beyond her expectations. Could it be for me? Her gaze unconsciously lingered on my face. Unnameable thoughts suddenly sprouted in her heart, but immediately after, she found the idea ridiculous. It was too presumptuous. Besides, my personality wasn't the type to act purely out of personal emotion. That mutant pufferfish has something I need, I said briefly, my voice cold and calm. In truth, aside from the mutant core, there were other reasons, but I didn't feel the need to say them. Have you thought this through, Captain Jiang? Xiang Shuehai stayed silent for a moment, then pursed her lips and looked up at me. If you really manage to kill that monster, you'll be helping Shuangwu County immensely. Is there anything I can do to help? Just say the word. We hadn't known each other long, but she knew I was a cautious person who didn't make empty boasts. No matter how unbelievable this plan felt in her heart, she ultimately chose to trust me. I need a lot of diesel, as much as possible. As for the ship, I already got the information from Mr. Sunday. I nodded, not refusing her help. I had checked the Starseed system. The amphibious-based vehicle required a massive amount of fuel to operate. No one knew how long the battle would last. I couldn't let a situation happen where I ran out of fuel while fighting the water monster, leaving me stranded in the middle of the river. Furthermore, I had consumed quite a bit of fuel along the way without replenishing it. Resupplying was mandatory. Xiang Shuahai didn't ask any further questions and immediately agreed. She trusted me. If I succeeded, Shuangwu County would be saved. That reason alone was enough for her to go all out to help. I returned to the minibus and announced the plan to the Shuriying squad. We were going to kill the water monster. Zhang Hai and Sun Kuan's eyes went wide, and then Zhang Hai immediately let out an excited shout. At first, it was shock, but very quickly, both of them became thrilled. That monster had blocked our path, making it impossible for us to leave, yet I was planning to hunt it down. Monsters always overpowered humans, treating them as food. It was rare for anyone to dare fight back, yet their captain was doing exactly that. After days of fighting the flood and seeing survivors building the dike with their bare hands, anger had long been building up inside them. "You two stay here. The rest of you, come with me," I said. Seeing Zhang Hai and Sun Kuan stunned, I explained further that we were only taking the minibus this time. Seating was limited, and besides, Shuangwu County still needed people to guard against zombies, mutant beasts, and even the water monsters. After the internal conflict, this place was short on manpower. It was best for the two of them to stay and help. Hearing this, Zhang Hai scratched his head, then patted his chest and promised that he wouldn't let me worry about the rear. I just chuckled softly. This trip was mainly to find a ship. Once it was done, we'd return immediately, so there was no need to bring too many people. Rin Xiu was a mental type ability user. Her main task was to detect mental waves, spot danger early, and identify enemies, an indispensable strategic asset. Li Yusin was the squad's doctor, making her even more crucial in emergency situations. "I want to go too. I've recovered quite a bit, and besides, my ability works best in the water," Jiang Zhuing said hurriedly, raising her hand as sparks of electricity flashed in her palm. I looked over at Li Yusin, who seemed a bit flustered. After observing Zhuing for a moment, she said softly that her ability had almost fully recovered, but her hands still needed more rest. "But Sister Yusin is going too, right?" Zhuing playfully leaned in close, giggling by her ear. Tickled by her breath, Li Yusin's face turned red. She dodged while laughing softly, telling her to stop. Watching the two girls joke around so intimately, a rare trace of warmth welled up in my eyes. Outside was an apocalyptic world flooded with water and crawling with monsters, but inside this little minibus, laughter still rang out. That was the fruit of the strength we had fought for together. "All right, I'll do my best to help you fully recover as soon as possible." Li Yusin finally gave in, her face flushing when she realized Rin Xiu and I were watching her. I nodded. Jiang Zhuing immediately sneaked a victory V sign with her hand, her eyes full of mischief. "I want to go too," another voice chimed in. I turned my head and saw Zero leaning against the vehicle's handrail, quietly observing everyone. Actually, ever since we arrived in Subei, the transaction between Zero and the Shuriing squad had been completed. We hadn't spoken much along the way, but through several battles, I clearly sensed that Zero was a woman of few words who worked reliably and struck decisively. She wanted to come along, and I didn't object, just giving a slight nod. Besides them, there was one more person I absolutely had to bring. Sun Shuangxin, the expert familiar with the terrain, who would guide us to the military shipyard. Xiang Shuahai worked quickly and decisively. After promising to supply me with diesel, she immediately led people to search the warehouses and gas stations. Inside the minibus, I sat in the driver's seat and quickly connected to the Starseed system. System receiving host command. Base vehicle initiating scan and inspection. The Starseed's cold voice echoed in my mind. Though the voice was emotionless, it brought me a sense of security, because this was my greatest pillar of support in this apocalyptic world. On the screen, the base vehicle's basic parameters appeared one by one. Base vehicle series. Spatial configuration includes upgraded bedroom, kitchen, bathroom, small living room, and level 1 combat room. Weaponry includes level 1 pneumatic gun, level 1 ramming angle, and compressed flamethrower. Energy laboratory unlock progress at 30%. Right below that, a long scanning progress bar appeared. Scanning. Base vehicle tires damaged. Left reinforced tire ruptured, 10% damage. Right middle tire worn by 2%. Fuel tank requires 300 liters of fuel. Right bulletproof window sustained level 1 damage. Lines of results popped up continuously. When I saw the 30% progress on the energy laboratory, I paused for a moment before continuing to review the other items. There were quite a few minor issues. If not repaired in time, the vehicle could easily run into trouble once we encountered powerful mutant zombies or mutant beasts. Fortunately, I still had repair materials like steel, chromium, and grease stored in my spatial inventory, so I immediately ordered the Starseed to initiate the repair process. The entire process only took a little over 10 minutes. Not wanting to waste any time, I immediately opened the enhancement section on the control panel. A series of evolution options appeared before my eyes. The last time I left the Shanghai base, I had upgraded quite a few items. If it weren't for those enhancements, the base vehicle would have run into endless trouble long ago. Take the bulletproof tires alone. If they were still the old type, they probably would have been punctured by the mutant wild dog's teeth up to 30%, rather than just the 10% damage they had now. The bulletproof glass and alloy armor had also withstood countless impacts from rocks and cars. Last time, I had used up all my mutant cores for upgrades, but there were actually still many things I wanted to acquire. Right now, I had 12 mutant cores, but it was still unclear how many would be needed to unlock the base vehicle's third form. Even though mutant cores were incredibly precious, I couldn't hesitate when I needed them. I immediately chose to upgrade the biological laboratory. Previously, I had evolved my brain, improved my reflexes, and awakened the mutant bloodline in my body. Those abilities had saved my life and my teammates' lives many times. But after the incident with Yang Feng, I realized my physique was still inferior to some of the more powerful ability users. I needed to continue enhancing myself. Having agility without physical strength was no different from courting death. Having reflexes without endurance wouldn't let me live long either. Now that I had fully mastered the abilities I possessed, I felt ready to take the next step. Among the physical enhancement options like agility, strength, stamina, or brain power, I decided to focus on defense. Higher defense meant a greater chance of survival. Even if it wasn't enough to stop a handgun bullet at this stage, it could at least withstand knives and other sharp weapons. Last time, if Ren Xiu hadn't used her mental power to suppress Yang Feng, I definitely would have paid a heavy price under the attacks of those controlled tree roots. I couldn't stay inside the base vehicle all the time, and since I'd soon be facing the mutant pufferfish, enhancing my defense was an absolute must. I pulled up the biological laboratory's control panel. Option 1, Level 1 Defense Enhancement. Toughens the skin, muscles, and blood. Can withstand knife attacks. After the second evolution, can withstand handgun bullets. Just reading the description was enough to tempt me. This enhancement would comprehensively improve my body's defensive capabilities, bringing immense benefits and noticeably boosting my physique. I consumed one mutant core, and after a short wait, a vial of pale green liquid appeared in my hand. I drank the vial in one gulp. Almost instantly, a burning sensation erupted in my body, as if I were being scorched by fire from the inside out. But having gone through this a few times already, I quickly adjusted my breathing, forcefully pushing through the negative reactions. 10 minutes later, I looked up, my entire body drenched in sweat. As I stood up, I clearly felt that my body was different from before. My skin had become softer, covered in a faint sheen, but when I tried scratching it lightly, my fingernails left absolutely no mark. My skin was as tough as buffalo hide, though it was invisible to the naked eye. My bones and muscles were also noticeably stronger. A feeling of boundless vitality spread throughout my body, making me feel more comfortable than ever before. Zhuiying, come here. I called my sister from outside the vehicle. While I was in the base vehicle, everyone except Zhuiying had gone outside to help, so no one noticed the change. What do you want? Zhuiying looked at me suspiciously as soon as she stepped in, immediately sensing something different. Shock me a little, I said. Brother, that is the weirdest request I've ever heard. You're not a masochist, are you? Zhuiying asked in surprise. I shook my head helplessly. If I tell you to shock me, just do it. Stop talking so much. I had no idea where this girl learned all these weird things. Zhuiying giggled and didn't say anything else. She reached out and touched my arm, and a small spark of electricity flashed. I let out a soft groan of pain, but the corners of my mouth curled into a smile. It worked. No way, do you actually like being shocked? Zhuiying's eyes widened, looking at me like I was some alien creature. You're not my real brother, are you? Where's my real brother? I just looked at my sister calmly, a distinct joy welling up inside me. My body's defensive capabilities had truly been enhanced. This mutant core was absolutely worth it. Being shocked by Zhuiying still hurt, but my pain tolerance had increased significantly, and the numbness faded very quickly. It was completely unlike others, who would usually be paralyzed and unable to move for a long time. That proved my blood, muscles, and recovery rate had all noticeably improved. A few hours later, outside the base vehicle, barrels of diesel were delivered one after another. Xiang Shuahai had put in a lot of effort to gather this much fuel, not only emptying out the storage depots, but also siphoning diesel from large trucks. Many survivors drove trucks, and all their diesel was collected. She also notified all the survivors in Shuangwu County. The news spread so fast that almost everyone knew I needed diesel. The survivors respected and were grateful to me, the man who had killed the mutant monster and helped them build the flood dike. They also heard that I needed the fuel to deal with the giant monster in the river. If it was destroyed, the hydrology experts would release the floodwaters, and they would be saved. Because of this, everyone quietly took action, scouring the town for fuel. Even some of the elderly brought diesel from their threshing machines to contribute. As barrel after barrel of fuel was placed in front of the base vehicle, I looked at their gaunt faces and tattered clothes, seeing the genuine hope shining in their eyes. They truly hoped I could kill that monster. Captain Jiang, I've gathered all the fuel in the city. This is all there is. Xiang Shuahai wiped her sweat, her voice apologetic. Her hands were covered in black oil, leaving patchy streaks when she wiped her pale forehead. It's enough. This is enough. I nodded seriously. At a rough estimate, this fuel, even including what was in the rusty old iron barrels, had to be over 1,000 liters. Oh right, the mutant wild dog you killed, I brought it back for you too. This is your squad spoil of war. Xiang Shuahai seemed to suddenly remember, turning around and signaling to Luo Junjiang. Behind him, on a large tarpaulin, lay the motionless mutant wild dog, its dark brown blood already dried and crusted. The meat is still well preserved. Everyone knew it was your squad spoil, so no one dared to steal it. The mutant core is still intact too. Xiang Shuahai smiled, a look of pride on her face. The survivors had been starving for days, but faced with mutant beast meat, no one dared to touch it. They even reminded each other to stay away, knowing it was what the Shuriying squad needed to deal with the water monster. They needed the nutrition to keep their strength up. I'll keep the core. As for the meat, divide it up among everyone, I said. There was already enough mutant beast meat in the base vehicle. I didn't need any more. How can we do that? Xiang Shuahai quickly objected. I waved my hand, not letting her say another word. I turned to the survivors and shouted, "Divide this meat up and eat it." The crowd froze for a second, then erupted into cheers. A little girl with bright black eyes and a dirt-smudged face looked at the mutant wild dog on the ground, then stepped forward and said to me, "Thank you, mister." Before I could reply, she turned and ran back toward the crowd, shouting as she ran, "Mommy! Mommy, the nice mister gave us meat to eat." Endless storms, fleeing for their lives, and then building the flood dike. A series of relentless disasters had pushed the physical and mental limits of the Shuangwu County survivors to the brink of collapse. If it weren't for Xiang Shuahai's leadership, and if everyone hadn't constantly encouraged each other, many would have likely collapsed from exhaustion. Now, hearing that I was sharing the mutant wild dog meat for everyone to eat, the people who had been slumped on the ground everywhere suddenly seemed revitalized. Many secretly swallowed their saliva. Normally, even a full meal was a luxury, yet now they actually got to eat mutant beast meat. To them, this was nothing short of a dream. Amidst that joy, their gratitude toward the Shuriying squad deepened even further. Never before had an ability user squad treated them like this. Everyone knew that mutant beast meat was always the exclusive privilege of ability users. The survivors who still had some strength took the initiative to divide the work. Some went to fetch clean water, some looked for large pots, and others hurriedly gathered firewood to start a fire. Zero quietly stepped up to handle cutting and roasting the meat. Wherever the small knife in her hand glided, the meat was sliced neatly. Li Yusin also took out some spices from her spatial storage, sprinkling cumin and brushing on a layer of oil, making the roasting mutant beast meat give off an intoxicating aroma. When the cooked meat filled the large pots, joyous cheers echoed throughout the gathering area, lasting for a long time. The dancing firelight illuminated their grease-smudged but joy-filled faces. A little girl tried to stuff a piece of meat into the mouth of her emaciated mother beside her, swallowing her saliva as she did. "Mommy, eat. Mommy, eat. Tong Tong isn't hungry." The mother just pulled her child into her arms, kissing her forehead as tears fell endlessly. Tong Tong, Mommy will eat with you. There's still plenty of meat. Our whole family gets to eat. Not far away, Zhuiying stood silently on a ruined wall. I walked up behind her. Zhuiying, what are you looking at? She looked toward the mother and daughter, then turned back and smiled at me. I was just thinking. I think I'm still very lucky. I froze for a moment, then quietly wrapped my arm around her shoulders. Our parents were gone, and since childhood, it had only been me quietly taking care of her. Yet, in the midst of this apocalypse, the two of us were still together. It truly was a rare stroke of luck. Zhuiying tilted her head and leaned on my shoulder. This is the only place that makes me feel safe. You'll always be with me, right? I stayed silent. Brother, you're the best. Done acting spoiled? Get in the vehicle. I nudged her back toward the base vehicle. It was still drizzling outside, and she hadn't fully recovered yet. Xiang Shuahai brought over another batch of supplies, including metal and lubricating oil for machinery that the base vehicle needed. The vehicle had been repaired earlier, but my reserves were running low and needed to be replenished promptly. Although Shuangwu County wasn't large, it was still considered a centralized market in the apocalypse, so these things could still be found in sufficient quantities. She also handed me a slightly rolled-up civilian map. This is a map I found. You guys might need it. It covers the area you're heading to. It just doesn't mark the specific location of the military shipyard. I nodded. With the map and Mr. Sun coming along, finding the shipyard would be much easier. Just then, a heart-wrenching cry for help suddenly echoed from the flooded area in the distance. The joyful atmosphere on the mountainside instantly vanished. Everyone turned to look and saw a dilapidated fishing boat being swept toward Shuangwu County by the floodwaters. On the boat, two men were being torn apart by a zombie, blood spraying everywhere. Just as the zombie finished killing one man and lunged at the other, a column of water over 3 meters high suddenly erupted from the surface. A massive dark shadow breached the surface, opening its terrifying maw. It flipped the boat and swallowed both the zombie and the manhole. The mutant pufferfish. I frowned. That monster was indeed still lurking in the water. The survivors looked at each other, their newly lifted spirits plummeting by more than half. As long as the floodwaters didn't recede, as long as that monster still existed, no one could leave this place. I quietly watched the murky, churning water, my heart heavy. The situation really wasn't looking optimistic. Not long after, the scurrying squad finished their preparations, ready to set out. The survivors, along with Xiang Shuahai, stood around the base vehicle to see us off. You can do it. A little girl in the crowd jumped up and waved at me. The elderly and the young all shouted their goodbyes, their eyes brimming with hope. Captain Jiang, be careful out there. Zhang Hai shouted. Remember exactly what my brother told you. Zhuiying stuck her head out the window to remind them. Don't worry, we remember it all. Sun Kuan patted his chest and replied with a laugh. I nodded, my gaze stopping where Xiang Shuahai was standing. Captain Jiang, have a safe trip, she said, pursing her lips. A vague sense of worry welled up inside her, afraid she might never get the chance to see me again. Finally, she smiled. I wish you smooth sailing. Everyone in Shuangwu County and I will be waiting for your return. I could clearly hear the worry in her voice, and my heart fluttered slightly. I will definitely bring that ship back and destroy that mutant pufferfish, I said, treating it as a promise. She gave a slight nod. I rolled up the window and gave Zhuiying the order. Let's move out. The base vehicle's engine roared fiercely. Amidst the waving hands bidding us farewell, the vehicle began to roll forward, heading toward the higher ground of Shuangwu County and advancing toward the military shipyard. The road ahead was a dirt path connecting Shuangwu County and Qingshi County. The two counties were over 100 miles apart, separated by endless rolling mountains. Even before the apocalypse, there was only a dirt road about 3 meters wide here, located to the north of Shuangwu County.